Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 75 of FPL BlackBox, and of course, our first of the 22-23 season. Look at all our new graphics, aren't they shiny, Mark?
I know, like the colours, like the new green. The mint won out, didn't it, in the voting in the pre-season?
It did, and there's always going to be a bit of a pushback on it because people don't like change. But I'm really happy with them. I think they look really nice.
And you went
fresh.
you went for the dark look as well, the dark mode as people call it. Is that how you have your Twitter as well?
Yes, of course. Everything on has got to be in dark mode these days.
Yeah.
It's the future.
Fair enough. Great opening there for the podcast listener. This is the first pre-season Black Box, the first of the new season, 22-23. Great to be back. We're not match fit. It'll take a couple of episodes, but we'll get up to speed by game week 1. That's the plan, right, Ez?
Do we ever get up to speed? This is about as good as it gets. I mean, we nearly went on time today, except for my toilet breaking in the closing stages.
You better go into detail on that. When you say toilet breaking, that isn't taking multiple toilet breaks, is it?
It isn't. No. It's. I've had this issue before actually. If anyone was watching a scout video, I was late for a scout video about 6-7 months ago. Toilet wasn't working, and the same things happen. There's problems with the pipes, it seems.
Plumbing problems affecting your live streaming. It's outrageous. And I had all the tech ready to go, and the gremlins of your toilet struck. But never mind, we're ready to go now. I'm on a Spaces later at 9:30, so I've got to get cracking. We've got to go at pace, but they can wait, can't they? Don't worry.
Is that for Fest?
That is for Fest. We'll talk about Fest at the end. So what we're going to do in tonight's show, we're basically going to look at ownership. We're going to look at player value. We're going to look at the community template. We're going to look at our first drafts, of course. There was exactly 2 weeks to go. Effectively, 2 weeks from this current time, there'll be 3 minutes to go to the first kickoff. That's hard to believe, isn't it? It's gone quite quickly, hasn't it?
It kind of has, and it hasn't really. I mean, we should have had a World Cup, or be having a World Cup or something. We haven't had that. I don't know. It's been kind of a nice break, but I've also been doing stuff for scouts. So it hasn't really felt like a full break, but it's been a bit quieter. I don't know, it's been nice. I'm looking forward to it starting though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a very busy summer for me as a Forest fan, but more on that later. First mention of Jesse Lingard after 5 minutes.
11 signings.
Yeah, we're still coming through the door. It's revolving doors at Forest at the moment. It's very exciting. Link with a new player every day. So, do you see today? Dusan Tadic is the latest as well. Oh,
yeah.
Another FPL legend, that would be, wouldn't it? Another one of my favourite players in FPL as well as real life.
Are you saying Jesse Lingard is an FPL legend? Is that what you were hinting
at? For me, he is. Well, for me, of course, for 2 seasons ago, he was him and Gundogan were responsible for my rank, weren't they, that season? Not last season, we won't talk about last season, but the season before last. Getting on Lingard and the XG-defying performances that he put in made my season, so I loved him from that point on. So now he's through the door. There we go. 5 minutes in, and Jesse gets his first mention.
3 times already. It's quite impressive.
We got a sponsor. We're all grown up, aren't we? We've got a sponsor for tonight's episode. Let's bring details of that, and you can tell us all about it.
Yeah. So this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. I'm guessing a lot of people are familiar with VPNs and what they do, helping you kind of beef up your internet security and your privacy and all of that. I mean, the hacks and stuff of the last season and the season before really made me kind of, and data leaks and all that kind of stuff really made me kind of fix things. So I got myself a password manager thing. I have all unique passwords now. All that kind of stuff is really important.
So it's not Brighton 01 anymore then, as it's not.
It's not Brighton 01. No. One of my friends actually had a password which was just I love, and then what other girlfriend he had at the time. So he was
that
really
could be very, very dangerous. I would never have done that.
It was absolutely. I know, because then he'd be logging into accounts with the wrong
that's a bad error.
Exactly. So you can avoid all that with NordVPN. People might know NordVPN as well. If you watch like YouTube shows, people like PewDiePie and some of the really big guys all endorse it. The Trustpilot reviews are really good. It's like the best VPN you can get. So yeah, we're really happy to kind of promote it, because I mean, you use a VPN, don't you? I've started using the VPN as well.
I do
because public places.
I mean, it's where if you're in public places, you've got to watch your connection. Also, if you go to like some dubious footballers' TikToks or Instagram accounts, I'm not saying who, but you want to be protecting your IP, don't you? Basically, if you're doing that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So with NordVPN, there's 3 packages: standard, the Plus, which is VPN, and the Password Manager, Complete VPN, Password Manager, and the Locker, so you can secure all your files. We've got an affiliate link, which is nordvpn.com/scout. You get a month free if you use that affiliate link. And the best bit is you get 30-day money back guarantee. So if you don't like it for whatever reason, you get a full refund. So I strongly urge anyone who uses the internet or is worried in any way about security just to get these things in place.
You can also, as if I'm right in saying, change your IP address to another country's IP address and get Netflix and that
you can
territory and even maybe football, I've heard, but I don't want to go into that. That's the dark arts.
Yeah, I mean, you can do all that. There's loads of benefits to it. So yeah, give it a go.
There you go.
NordVPN.com/scout.
Aren't we grown up? PewDiePie's got a sponsor now. We have as well. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, I nearly mentioned Jesse again then in the TikTok reference, but I just let it go. Right, let's start. Let's start looking ahead to the 22-23 season. I'm going to bring up a graphic by Holly Shand, who's known to us and the community. If you don't follow her, it's at Holly Shand. Excellent account to follow. Does a load of stuff. She does things on TikTok as well. She's one of the first on TikTok, actually. And what she did, I think this is the best visual breakdown of the season and what we've got ahead of us. And what's interesting about the season, this one in particular, is it's got the World Cup smack bang in the middle of it. How do you think that's going to go? It's like it's between, what is it, 18 and 19, is it? Or 17 and 18, the World Cup. It is crazy, isn't it? There it is. 16 and 17, sorry. That's mad, isn't it?
It's so random when you think about. I mean, I guess it's less random for some of the other leagues because they have like the winter breaks and stuff. But for us, just to have that tournament just drop straight in, then come back. I mean, I guess it is even weirder for the other leagues because they're used to a break and they're getting a World Cup instead. I don't really know how the other leagues are kind of coping with it, but our system is odd. It's going to shake up FPL. This new wild card is going to be really interesting. We're going to talk about it later. But yeah, an extra wildcards early on for FPL managers probably means we're going to be wildcarding a lot earlier with our first one this season.
Yeah, I think it makes you think. I mean, the interesting thing for me is that by game week 18, you're getting to your you're getting to your third keeper and so on. So it makes you think about your goalkeeper differently because often the case, you pick your game week 1 lineup with almost the full season in mind. You shouldn't, but you do. You kind of do, don't you? You kind of, and you've got to remind yourself that actually it's very likely I'm going to play the wild card early, and therefore I should only look at maybe the first 4 or 5 game weeks, which is what we're going to look at tonight. But yeah, with this wild card coming in between 17 and 18, I think it is. You're effectively getting to change your team twice ahead of game week 18, which we're not used to doing. And of course, you get the second wild card for the second half of the season. And as you can see by Holly's graphic, we know there's blank game weeks and double game weeks to come in that second half of the season. And of course, that's when all the chips come into play, including that second wild card, if you like. So yeah, it's unlimited transfers, the World Cup one, rather than a wild card, isn't it? I think it's not officially called a wild card, but it is.
Is there any difference?
No, there's no difference whatsoever. But yeah, it's confusing when you're thinking about wild card 1 and wild card 2. Do you think what's the repercussions of this? I mean, obviously there's the break and there's fatigue and but do you think also players who are going to be vying to get in World Cup squads? We've never had it that mid-season they're going to be, presumably buoyed by the fact they're pushing to get into that squad, right? Normally it's the end of the season. You think, well, that could be a factor because so-and-so is trying to get into the X squad and therefore he's going to be trying to get minutes. He's going to try and impress. I mean, obviously players go out to impress every game, but you've got to think the World Cup's a pretty big incentive for anyone trying to get into that England squad, for example, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at a player like James Justin, for example. So he's someone who's kind of on the periphery of the England squad, I imagine. I think he probably gets in anyway because of his versatility across that back line. But he's the kind of player who will be thinking, okay, I need to have a strong start to the season, and make sure I get into that squad. There's going to be loads of players like that. But on the flip side, it also means players like Salah, who are just going to have their feet up for a month. That's going to be really important when we're picking this wild card to kind of, look to see who's getting knocked out early, who's just going to have their feet up for the whole time, and look for those. But I think definitely with our kind of early moves, targeting players who are looking to get into that World Cup side is a really good idea, I think. But
of course, there's no point in sitting here now and planning for that between 17 and 18 because we've got our first wild card. So again, it's not like we can sit and go, oh, I'm going to get that player because they don't go to the World Cup, because you've got that opportunity with the wild card that you must play in that first half of the season. So that's why it's strange. We need to think about it, but we don't need to think about it just yet, perhaps, because your game week 1 lineup shouldn't be influenced by that World Cup because of the wild card. Now, I think my theory is that many will play their first wild card between 5 and 8. Is that what your thinking is as well, with that international break there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think 8 would probably be quite late. I think it's going to be between 5 and 6 for a lot of people. There's some good fixture turns for some sides, like Leicester, for example. And I think people are going to really target that first block of fixtures where we've got some good games for some sides, and then kind of swap things around. So yeah, really early wildcards, I think, all round. No one's going to be leaving it till like 10 or 11, I don't think.
Yeah, and the other thing to look at there, as Holly points out in the graphic, is the European group start in between 6, 7, right? Yeah. So not only should we look at a swing around them, but the fact that obviously with the 5 subs this season, teams are going to have a much more ability to rest players with the Champions League and Europa League in mind. So that's going to be the first. I think that around there is where we're really going to see the 5 subs comes into play. It's going to take a few weeks for us to judge how it's going to affect minutes, but when the European ties kick in as well midweek, that's when we really expect to go, okay, we're going to learn quite a lot about how Pep and Klopp, for example, view their use of the 5 subs. That's going to be intriguing. And again, that's a reason why having that wildcard played around that time, when we've got some information and data on that and some examples of that, could be really useful, right?
I wonder as well. I mean, I mentioned earlier about kind of Salah having his feet up and stuff, but you know, and you kind of said that might not kind of factor into our decision making at the start. But do you think there might be players who are going off to the World Cup, definitely going off to the World Cup? There might be something around not wanting to kind of overload them too much, particularly in kind of the weeks building up to it. So maybe the players who aren't going to the World Cup, maybe they feature a bit, you know, more or something like that. I'm just thinking of someone like Salah, for example. There's no reason to kind of rest Salah or even take him off because you know he's going to have that time to kind of rest when the World Cup's on. So there's kind of two things, isn't there? There's the players that are vying for it, and then the players who are definitely going. Maybe they.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, like, why would the clubs be motivated to rest players for the World Cup? They're not going to care, are they? They're just going to put their best team out. They're not going to.
They'll care if they go off and get injured at the World Cup.
Yeah, I guess so. But I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, I think certainly leading up to like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, these are the game weeks leading up to the World Cup break. It's going to be really interesting, isn't it? And with the 5 subs, I mean, all bets are off, really. We're kind of relearning the way that expected minutes works, for example. When I say expected minutes, that's the minutes that players get on the pitch. We've got an idea.
It's become a thing now, isn't it?
It has. And I think this is the subs and the World Cup have really brought it to the fore this season. It's probably going to be at its most important, I would have thought. And again, but that's going to be a factor tonight when we start looking at players. It's certainly a factor when you look at 2 strikers in particular, Haaland and Kane, I think. Right, Ticker, I've got a theory. Look, game weeks 1 to 5 is a period where, well, I'm going to go into the season probably thinking game weeks 1 to 5, I'm going to run my team as it is and play the wild card somewhere after that. Maybe between 5 and 6, maybe between 7 and 8 or 6 and 7, but it's going to be around that time. So I'm currently just looking at the first 5 game weeks when I'm building my game week 1 squad, or largely looking at that anyway. Is that in line with your thinking, or are you looking beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, fixtures are always ridiculously important. You know, they're probably the most important metric. You know, we talk about fixtures, underlying stats, all these kind of things. I mean, the trouble is, a team like Leeds, for example, have got like one of the best first 5 games out there. They've got Wolves, Southampton, okay, Chelsea, but then Brighton and Everton. So a lot of people are going for Meslier, you know, going for, well, that's pretty about it. Now Rafinha's gone, but I'm seeing him mentioned, or, you know, even that new centre-back, I've seen him coming up in a couple of teams. And I just think, I know those first 5 are important, but do I really want to get poor players from those sides just because they've got good fixtures? I think the good thing is that you've got City, you've got Liverpool, and you've got Chelsea and Arsenal all right at the top of the ticker. So I think it'd be a bit more interesting if we saw some of the other teams like Leicester, for example. Like, we don't really know what we're going to get with Leicester, but if they had really good opening 5 fixtures, I think that'd be really interesting because that would kind of give you that decision to make. But because it's kind of worked out that all the top teams have really good first 5, that just seems to be the obvious strategy. I did a team reveal with Praz earlier, for example, and he had 10 players from the top 5 sides.
Yeah.
and Neto.
Oh, yeah. We're definitely going to touch on that in a minute. I've got an interesting set of charts. I mean, basically over the summer, I've gone around and collected some of the stuff that really caught my interest, and I've got a set of charts by who put them together? Chase, at Chase FPL, who has done some rolling XG charts. We'll look at those in a minute, but it certainly kind of endorses looking at like the top 4 or 5 teams only.
That's it.
And the pricing allows us to do that. I mean, we've talked about the pricing previously. It is kind, isn't it, in some areas?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of defence, and the reason why you can get 10 out of 11 of your team is because you target those wing backs and those full backs. I mean, you look at teams like Palace, look at teams like Newcastle, even like Southampton or West Ham. The fixtures aren't that good, so it doesn't really promote their players kind of high enough. So yeah, I think going for the first 5 or 6 fixtures on its own, it would be a good strategy. But because we've got all the top teams with the best fixtures, it's just the most obvious play.
It is. It really is. But what's interesting is because we've got that unlimited transfers between 17 and 18, you're not going to want to push the wild card close to that. You're going to want to play it as far away from that as possible, right? So you're not going to play it perhaps in the first 2 or 3 game weeks. You're going to try and avoid to do that. You're not going to pick a game week 1 squad with the idea that you're going to play a wild card in 2 or 3. You might have to, because you might get something very wrong, or bandwagons might kick off that you've got to jump on, right? So there's a possibility that we all end up wild carding in 3 or 4. But in terms of planning, you're probably going to look for a sweet spot of 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, but that's nearing that game week 7. That's a bit too close. You want to play it earlier. So because of that, do you not think you could take more risks with your opening team? Because I've seen a lot of people say that, yeah, Salah's kind of essential, but if there's ever a season where you could go against him, because you know for sure you're going to be wildcarding quite early and maybe very early because of that unlimited transfers over the World Cup, maybe this is the season where you would take a few more risks with your game week 1 lineup and players like Meslier. That's, you're going to be on your 3rd keeper by game week 18, right? So the idea of picking a game week 1 goalkeeper that has to serve you for the season, it's not true at all, absolutely. Right? So what do you think about that? I mean, would you take more risk because of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain kind of like non-negotiable players, isn't there? Like you're looking at Trent Cancelo, probably a Chelsea fullback, but then apart from that, I think this news about Haaland's been quite interesting because we've suddenly seen Haaland go from in everyone's draft on Twitter to suddenly falling out of favour a little bit, and people are thinking, oh, maybe I could go for De Bruyne, maybe I could get Kane in there instead and kind of assess that and see what happens. United with Rashford sort of emerging with Ronaldo's problems, he's actually entered into the template now. When I did the poll on Twitter and asked for people's teams, Rashford was in nearly every team that I looked at. So people are trying to find ways to kind of differentiate. I mean, Rashford, for example, is now becoming template. So it kind of makes a whole kind of new issue. That means Martinelli, for example, is now maybe less template. So I think we are starting to see the pool of players grow. And we'll talk about the template team later, but I was actually quite happy to see quite a bit of diversity in people's teams. There's these same core players, same 5 or 6 core players, but the kind of fringe players are actually changing around quite a bit as more options emerge. So there is a strong template, but I think a lot of people are thinking like you do and thinking I can differentiate a little bit with some of these guys. Yeah,
I mean, I just think there's a bit more freedom when you know you're going to be playing the wild card around 4, 5, 6, right? You know that. There's no like previous seasons. It's been I'm going to save it till late because there's double game weeks to come around 18, 19, 20. So if I can play the first wild card nearer that, I don't have to play the second wild card for 18, 19, 20. I can use my first wild card to do it. So you push that wild card right at the end, 17, 18. Whereas this season, there's no way you're going to do that because of the World Cup. You're going to play it in a single-digit game week, probably. I mean, don't have to, but you probably are.
I think United are the perfect team for that because before the season, no one was considering any of them, right? And then the prices came out and we all thought, oh, actually, okay, some of these prices are quite kind. And now I'm seeing Sancho, Rashford, Martial.
Yeah.
I haven't seen too many Fernandez's because he's obviously that little bit more money. Dallo is coming into the equation now as a 4.5 defender. They're the kind of players who I feel like, okay, you get them in straight away. You see if there's a kind of, are they going to ride a wave of Ten Hag? And if they haven't after 3 or 4 games, you think, oh, okay, I'm going to go wildcard anyway, and you get shot. I mean, Rashford at 6'5", for example.
Well, why
not?
Worth a go, isn't it?
Yeah, why not?
I love that rider wave of Ten Hag. Yeah, love it.
Is there going to be a wave of Ten Hag? A lot of confidence in what he's doing.
Well, I mean, you got to look at the impact a new manager can have, and we saw it last season with Howe, we saw it with Conte. You know, it is one of the biggest factors in turning the team around. There's no doubt about it, as well as obviously new players. But yeah, what we're seeing pre-season is promising. We'll look at the pre-season results and form players in perhaps a next episode, but we're not going to dwell on it here because there's big friendlies to come, of course, still, and the Community Shield. My point here is there is a fixture swing as well after game week 5, because if you look at the teams at the top here, Arsenal, Man City, Wolves, Liverpool, and then you look down the bottom of this ticker and you see the newly promoted teams, Fulham, Forest, without a badge, come on Scout, sort it out, and Bournemouth at the bottom. Bournemouth at the very bottom. Bournemouth start with Villa, City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Wolves, a really tough first 5. Forest have Newcastle, West Ham, Everton, Spurs, City, so pretty tough, and Fulham, Liverpool, Wolves, Brentford, Arsenal, Brighton. So both of them have like 2 or even 3 tough fixtures in the opening 5, whereas at the top, just as you said, the cream of the crop, Liverpool and City have great starts. Arsenal, great start. Wolves, not a team we'd normally look at, but the fixtures turn our heads. Those 4 excel. If you then move on to game week 6, running up to game week 16, and you could go further, you could go to 17. Or I think it's 17 before we get the unlimited transfers. It changes completely. From game week 6 onwards, Bournemouth go from the bottom of the ticker to the very top. They have an incredible run. They don't play any big sides apart from Spurs at home in game week 14. So suddenly that swing is there. Also, if you look, Forest are 3rd on the ticker. Fulham are a little bit further down, but they have a really good run between game weeks 8 and 14. So suddenly I look at this and go, after game week 5, the likes of Solanke, Johnson, a fellow called Lingard, Mitrovic for sure, these are players that, although I'm not looking at them for game week 1 probably, I'm definitely going to look at them with my first wild card because there is that swing. And look at the bottom. Look at the bottom of the ticker. Arsenal bottom, Wolves 2nd from bottom, Liverpool 4th from bottom. And don't forget as well, European games kick in at this point as well. So not only do these teams have tougher fixtures, they also have tougher schedules. So there is a definite swing at this point, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's going to be these kind of like fringy players that we kind of swap out, and we'll have a bit of data to kind of back some of them up. Even though they'll have hard fixtures, we'll still see who's, you know, making good runs, whose underlying stats are good, all that kind of thing. I mean, because we're not going to be getting rid of like Cancelo, Trent, Diaz, Salah, Haaland, you know, those 5, even though they kind of fall down somewhat on the ticker. But getting, you know, if you start with 2 Wolves players and 2 Arsenal players, for example, play the wild card, swap those out, get in your Forest lot, get in your Lingard for Martinelli. And Leicester, I mean, that Leicester run is incredible. That's when Maddison and Justin and you know, maybe even Vardy or someone really can propel you up, because there's going to be a lot of people that don't react to this. And, you know, by 5 or 6, that's when you can probably make some quite big gains. So that's going to be a key part of the season, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you can go from if you started the season with one of Haaland or Kane, you could possibly switch up your front line to go all budget with Solanke and Mitrovic, for example, and then go bigger in midfield or even in defence if you want to. You're right. You are
Kane and Haaland to Solanke and Mitrovic. Wow.
Well, Kane or Haaland, I would have said. I don't think anyone's going to start. Well, but you look at this and you think, well, if Solanke is going to score in any spell of the season, it's going to be this one. I mean, Bournemouth are going to score some goals, and if Bournemouth are going to score some goals, Solanke is what I think his involvement was something like 50 or 60% in their goals last season. He is going to be the one involved. Same for Fulham in that 8 to game week 14 run. Mitrovic will get some points there. Right? I'm not saying that they're going to keep tally with Kane and Haaland maybe, but the money that you'll free up will help you invest elsewhere. Perhaps you then could get Maddison in for a Martinelli, like you say, because Arsenal's fixtures are bad. Maddison's are very strong. So a swap from an Arsenal player to a Maddison is on, right? A Saka maybe. And if you've gone Jesus, another player, he's our poster boy for this episode, right? Jesus' run from this point on, given that they're in Europe as well, and his minutes could be managed a bit more. We don't know if he's going to be the striker who plays in Europe or it's going to be in Nketiah. You know, you can use the wildcard at this point to get yourself out of that and reinvest somewhere else. For me, this is the swing area. There's always a point where you think, is there a fixture swing? And I think between 5 and 6, maybe 6 and 7 is where it's at, and it works really well with the timing of the season, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. I mean, you look at this list of teams and just thinking about the quality of the Premier League this season, I think it's really high. I mean, the top 6 battle is going to be really interesting. You've got a team like Newcastle investing heavily, West Ham just on the outskirts. I think there's going to be some whipping boys, though. I think the quality is so high in a lot of these sides that I'm looking at teams like Bournemouth, I'm looking at Fulham, I'm looking at Southampton, Leeds, these kind of guys. If they don't get off, no, I think Forest are going to be all right. I think of all the three sides, they're making good signings, and Jesse Lingard isn't a relegation signing. That's a mid-table, confident signing, and clearly have got the money. But I think there's going to be teams that we target, and I look at Bournemouth's fixtures, and I look at Forest, Brighton, Newcastle, Brentford, Leicester, and I think Bournemouth are going to probably be bottom of the league by that point. Sorry, Bournemouth fans, and that's not a great run of fixtures for them. I can't see myself going for like Solanke, for example.
Well,
so I think there's going to be certain games that we really target by this point, and we'll know who those teams are. I just think some teams are going to completely fall away this season, and some are going to do really well.
I disagree. I think Solanke in that run looks good. I mean, for $6 million, I think he's going to offer. It depends. I mean, I definitely prefer Mitrovic, and I probably will prefer Johnson, but I still think Solanke will be worth a look in that run. If you're not going to look at it then, he's gone, isn't he? He's not a factor.
I talk about teams for. I mean, Everton, for example. I mean, they just got smashed by Minnesota FC. I mean, they're
in trouble already, aren't they?
They're in big trouble, I think.
It's Lampard, what he's saying as well. He's going straight to the players. He's like, whereas other managers would normally go, I'm taking the responsibility of that. I didn't prepare the team. We're still a bit behind on fitness, etc. There's lots of excuses you could make for losing 4-0 on a friendly. No one really takes it seriously. But he's dug out his players straight away. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that.
Conceded a fluke goal, an average goal, another fluke goal. Shut up, Frank.
I don't like his communication at all. And if I was a player playing under him, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't have thought. And that's not a good sign when you're going into a season without Richarlison, who arguably is your best player as well. And they haven't really replaced.
Basically, single-handedly saved them. Yeah.
So as a Forest fan, I'm looking at that and lapping that up because I'm thinking, well, I don't see them starting the season well, and how long is Lampard going to be given if that's the case? If they keep him on till Christmas, they could be adrift. But it's hard to say. I think you're right. I think there's going to be some teams that are going to be ones we target. That's always the case.
Absolutely cast adrift. Yeah.
Do you see that? Do you see there's a big gap between the bottom and the rest?
I really do, yeah. Because I mean, I look at teams like Villa and Brighton. I think that they're strong. Wolves could kind of go either way. They had such a strong half of the season last year, and then such a poor one at the end. I think Palace are going to kick on. Brentford, I'm backing to kick on this season as well. I know they've lost Eriksen, and they haven't really got that creativity in there. But I still think I can't see them being one of these kind of sides that we look to target. But there are definitely. I mean, Everton, Bournemouth, and Fulham, and Southampton, and Leeds. That's 5. Yeah, those 5 teams are going to be the ones in the mix.
Do you not see the Brentford suffering from the Sheffield United difficult second season syndrome? I think there could be something in that for them.
Yeah, they could. I think goals are going to be the problem for them, especially if they don't sign a new kind of creative. Because it's De Silva, isn't it, who's been playing in pre-season?
But he's not Christian Eriksen, is he?
He's not Christian Eriksen. That's it.
It turned them around completely when they brought in a world-class creative player. What a surprise! I mean, Tony, was unlocked, if you like, and they were struggling before he came in. They were looking like they were going to get pulled into it. So I think they could be in the mix. And Forest aren't. We might be signing good players. It's going to take a while for them to gel. So we're going to be in it. We're going to be bottom 3 after 5 or 6 games for sure. It'll be the spell after that when we start to settle that will be telling. But I don't think we're going to be out of it by any means. We'll see who else comes in. Right, so these charts from... I want to bring up these charts from Chase. FBL_Chase, excellent account, particularly if you're into analytics. He's one of the analytics FC, if you like. He was featured, or these were featured on one of Luke's recent... you see Luke's gone off and he's seen other podcasts.
I know. We stole his name for this episode. That'll teach
kind of. Inspected Goals. If you haven't listened to it or watched it, it's on YouTube. It's also a podcast, I believe. It's Luke and Sam doing really, really, really kind of deep analytical stuff using XG a lot more even than us, right? But... I was going to use these charts before Luke nipped in and used them before me, so I'm claiming them still. I'm not going to not do it because Luke did, because I thought these were some of the best that I saw over the summer break so far. Just to explain what I'm showing on screen here, it's a table of all the teams in the Premier League, sorted by the far right column, which is basically May 2022, so the final month of the season. It is XG, non-penalty, so that's attacking XG, scaled by the fixture difficulty in the month. It looks at the 4 to 5 games in a given month, but it also blends that with 4 to 5 games of the previous month to give you a 10 match roll-in basically value. Effectively, what we're seeing here, though, is the gulf between the top teams and the rest. I mean, look at City and Liverpool. Look at the fact that their XG remains 2 or just over 2 for every part of the season last season. They were just absolutely consistent with their ruthlessness in terms of XG, weren't they?
But I mean, what is interesting about those two sides, though, is they're both going to, in theory, have to adopt new ways of playing. I mean, Liverpool have lost Mane now. Nunes is up top, different kind of striker maybe to what he was doing last season. Diaz, they've done well to get in Diaz in January because he's had that kind of bedding in season, so half a season. But City as well. I mean, with Haaland, it's going to be. I think Pep said we're just going to get him the ball into the box as much as possible, or something like that, which isn't really the way they kind of play normally. So I think Haaland can obviously adapt to kind of any way they want to play, and I think Nunes is, 4 goals in pre-season, not always a lot you can take from that, but they've paid £80 million for him. There's clearly a hell of a player there, so these players will be able to adapt. But are we going to see a bit of a bedding in period for them? I mean, it doesn't really matter because we're all going to have their players anyway. But again, it's interesting. They're at the top of this list. Tottenham as well, making loads of signings. Where's Richarlison going to fit? Was kind of thing. You've got to think they're going to improve and get stronger. Chelsea, new backline, Sterling coming in. There's a lot of change at these top clubs, but you've got to think they're all going to improve.
Yeah, look at Spurs after Conte as well. If you look at from December onwards, look at the improvement in their XG. It's marked, right? And you can. That's what we were talking about when a new manager comes in. That made a big difference to Spurs. And similarly, you look at Arsenal in the second half of the season from December onwards, they really improved as well in terms of their attack. And when you look at the defence, which is the next one we're going up, it's mirrored in that as well. I mean, what's interesting from the defensive figures, and this is rolling XG non-penalty conceded. Again, look at City here, though. I mean, it's like they didn't get to a value greater than 1 at any point in the season on this chart, which shows they were consistently the best defence throughout the season by quite a margin. Liverpool closed the gap towards the end, as this table shows, and they were as good, if not slightly better, at the end. But City over the season were just consistently the best defence. So we have to take from that. We've got to have at least one City defender in it. I mean, obviously there's one that stands out. But if you don't have Cancelo, you've got to have another City player, haven't you? You've got to have an Edison or you've got to have a Diaz, don't you not think?
I mean, you can't just be watching City hoping they're going to concede a goal because you'll be tearing your hair out. I mean, they do, occasionally concede a goal you wouldn't expect. Like all teams, there's always going to be sort of lapses. But they had like defensive, injuries and things last season. I mean, there was times when Ake was playing at left back and Diaz was injured and Laporte got suspended or something in there or something. Oh no, he got injured as well. I mean, they were kind of rotating in and out, but it never seemed to really make much of a difference to how many clean sheets they were getting. They've had a really interesting window because they've lost some quite key players like Jesus with all the running that he did on that right hand side, Sterling with all the goal contributions he had. Fernandinho's gone. I mean, he was playing last season. He was looking like an old man at times. So they brought Phillips in as obviously that kind of replacement. But then they've lost Zinchenko as well. Yeah, I mean, it's really really interesting to see. I don't think it's going to affect them that much. These are kind of all the kind of fringy type players, and the players they brought in have obviously massively strengthened them. If Cucurella goes as well, that's going to be one hell of a signing for them.
There's no if, is there? It's definitely going to happen, isn't it? It's definitely going to happen.
They will have to pay 50. I said ages ago, didn't I? They'd have to pay 50 million for him. Bloom won't budge on that. I don't think. Maybe 45 or something.
No, but I mean, like I think I said on the last episode that we did, Cucurella is right up there for his age group in terms of attacking fullbacks in the world. So he's one of the best examples of a young wing-back fullback in the world at the moment. So they've got to pay for it. They've got to pay top dollar. So I think you will get more than the 30 that they've bid, but not sure you get 50
million. Come on,
that's
30 million.
It's standard, isn't it?
I'll refuse to do business with them after that.
FPL Chase has then done this chart, which is the difference between non-penalty XG conceded and XG non-penalty gained. And again, you see from the massive blue just how much more effective the top teams, that is City, Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea, Arsenal, were than the rest of the division. Yes, Spurs and Arsenal, their form was more patchy. I say form, this is when they perform better in terms of XG gained versus XG lost. But City and Liverpool are just untouchable, weren't they, for both here, as this chart shows. So there's a top two, there's a group of 3, maybe 4 teams, you could say, and then the rest, there's quite a gap to the rest, isn't there? And then obviously the bottom are going to struggle. That's what we saw last season.
Mm.
Do you think things will change? Do you think the pack behind those top 4 or 5 teams will close the gap? Do you think the likes of Villa, maybe West Ham, maybe Newcastle will edge a little bit closer, or do you still see there being a gulf?
I think that the trouble is with all the teams except for City and Liverpool is they can go on runs of just not picking up points and not playing that well. I mean, look at Villa. They're so strong under Gerrard and then just drifted off, massively. Arsenal, they had a really bad blip. That cost them 4th place when they just started losing. They lost to Brighton. They lost another game. And they kind of really struggled. I mean, Wolves had such a strong first half and then just tailed away. Southampton always start strongly and then tail away. And so there's so many teams like that who, they have 1 or 2 kind of bad results. Maybe someone like West Ham, they're in Europe and then that kind of caught up with them. Leicester as well. I just think City and Liverpool have just... I think Spurs are the team that could really enter into it this season. And I can't quite believe I'm saying that. But you look at the squad depth they've got now across all of their different positions. At wing back, they made 2 great signings. Sorry about Jed Spence, not signing for Forest. Richarlison's come in. I don't know what his role was really going to be, but if he can come in and just give Son a break, or if Kane gets injured or something like that, they've got like a top quality replacement there. I think they're the only team that can really kind of push it. I look at Chelsea and just think they're still light. They're still light in that forward role. Lukaku was the perfect fit, and that didn't work out. And losing Rudiger's a big miss. Is Sterling going to adapt quickly? Yeah, I think the other teams are just too far away. I think it's going to be Spurs, City, and Liverpool. They're going to be the top 3.
I mean, Chelsea look to have made their defensive signings. I think Koundé is on the way. Koulibaly is already there. Sterling. I mean, I think we see Sterling in a team later on. So surely you back him, but you don't see with those signings. I guess it's a bedding down period, right, for all 3 of those players. If Koundé does come in, you don't see them make. Well, I guess if they lose points early on, they're not going to make up ground.
I really like Chelsea's opening fixtures, which is why I'm going for Sterling, and I think he's got a bit of a point to prove and all that kind of thing. And I rate him so highly as an FPL player. I mean, I know he's burned us both in the past, missing penalties and that, but he's definitely got the pedigree. But losing Rudiger is a big blow, and there's going to be games in which that are really tight that can be decided by a goal. And do they really have? Have they got that real clinical player in the side who can just take that chance? That's not Sterling, really. We've seen him kind of underperform in the past. He scores some amazing goals and great goals, but there are some goals that you'd expect him to score that he kind of doesn't. Havertz is kind of the same. So I think that's the difference. Yeah, I think that's the difference. I look at City, Liverpool, and Spurs and think they've all got these really clinical guys now, who are going to decide matches for them. And I think Chelsea are going to drop points in games in which they shouldn't, and that will ultimately cost them.
This is it. I mean, you can't afford to drop points. It's at the point where now City and Liverpool will think they've got to win every game. And a draw is... I mean, it doesn't seem a lot. If Liverpool go to Arsenal and draw 1-1, you think, well, that's not a bad result. 2 points lost is almost disastrous when you're chasing another team like City, and vice versa, right? So the standard is ridiculous now, the top 2, that even though Spurs and Chelsea and Arsenal are good teams who we perhaps 10 years ago would have challenged for the title, maybe even 5 years ago, but in this current landscape, there's no mercy from Liverpool and City, are there?
It's just the mentality, isn't it? The mentality of those 2 teams is exactly that. It's win every game. And Spurs historically have had amazing sides, but have never had that ruthless mentality of being able to grind out, a win when they've been really, really struggling. I mean, Conte had some really bad results last season. Remember that Burnley match when he kind of threatened to throw in the towel and things, then they lost 1-0. And, it's just whether they've still got that in them, or whether these new signings are going to push him up to that next level. I mean, they couldn't have had a better transfer window. They've literally addressed every weakness and every thing they had, and they've got such a strong side and such a good manager. They've got to be competing, but are they going to get all Spursy?
Yeah. So basically, it's simple. You target City, Liverpool, maybe Spurs, Chelsea, and Arsenal, don't you? That's it. 5 teams. Is that it? Is that really it? Because it does look that way, doesn't it? And actually, when you start putting a team together, as you said when you looked at Praz's team earlier, you can.
Yeah, I mean, Spurs are the kind of anomaly because it's really hard to fit in Kane and Son into this team. And people were so hot on Kulusevski, but then Richarlison's come in.
Yeah.
And it's made us question. I mean, I don't really know how I feel about Kulusevski because he was basically locked into my side until Richarlison came. Then I took him out. Then I've been thinking about it. And the more I think about it, the more I think, does it actually affect Kulusevski that much? How is Richarlison? He plays on the left predominantly, or he's not going to go onto the right and take his spot. Kulusevski's going to drop to wing back. Now Spence is there. So we're probably going to see Kulusevski play in the majority of games, 30 starts, probably, something like that, for 8 million. Maybe he is still the route into that Spurs attack.
I don't see it. I think his minutes will, of the three, Kane, Son and Kulusevski, you think he's the one who's going to get hooked first. I mean, he's going to get taken off in every single game. Is he not? Right, so that straight away, when you think, if I'm going to have one of those three, am I going to have the one that's definitely going to get subbed, or am I going to have Kane who
but he's 4 million less.
Probably isn't. I know, of course, but I don't think you double on the Spurs attack. I mean, you might go Son and Kane, right? But you're not going to get Kulusevski and Kane. I think I wouldn't anyway. I think that, and he's in that bracket, the 8 million bracket. We're going to have a look tonight at Mount and Saka. I think it's between Mount and Saka for that at the moment. Diaz obviously is in there if you're not going Robertson. So I think those three, Diaz, Mount, Saka, are ahead of Kulusevski for me until we see. I mean, this is what I mean. If we're going to play the wild card 5 or 6 or whatever around that period, you can move then. Don't think you've got to commit to him now.
But that's exactly my point. Spurs' fixtures are so strong at the start of the season that I'm looking at the 8 million bracket. I think Diaz is the standout. Exactly like you say. It's really hard to make a case against him. I think they could have pushed his price up. I don't think he's not an 8 million. I know he didn't really kind of deliver consistently last season, but he has the potential to be, if he starts the first couple of games and scores 2 or 3 goals, he's going to go like 70% owned or something like that, isn't he? He's going to be absolutely ridiculous. Whereas I think Kulusevski is someone that is going to massively fly under the radar because people are going to be going for Kane, they're going to be going for Son, or they're going to be going for no one because, people are going for Perisic. I have my doubts about him after speaking to Neil and doing some stuff with him on the kind of wing-back situation. I mean, Conte's already massively downplayed Spence and said...
Oh, what he said about Jed. I can't believe it.
I thought of you straight away. I know. He said he's a kind of a squad player. The club sees him as one for the future. He was just kind of like...
He's basically saying, don't put me under any pressure to play him. I'm not going to. So
that's exactly what he said. He was almost basically saying, I didn't really want him, but the club wanted to make an investment in him. That's almost what it said to me.
And I don't think Forest made a bid. I think basically he said to them, I'm going to Spurs if Spurs are after me, and they went, fair enough, we'll go elsewhere. Or they consider Nico a better bet. Nico Williams, who's come in. So it was really interesting that, because it looked like Spurs, they were taking their time on it, weren't they? And
they were.
Chris Wilder has said that Forest didn't bid. So
the good thing for Spence is that he's going to get chances to impress because Doherty probably won't carry on the form that he had last season. Emerson Royale was completely out of favour towards the end. Maybe we see Kulusevski go back to wing back, but we'll go to wing back. I doubt that's going to happen.
Well, he's talking about playing Moore out there, though, isn't he? He's talking about Lucas Moore as a wing back. Well,
yeah, but is that going to happen? I don't know. I think Spence will have the bit in his sleeve to kind of impress him, and he'll get chances. And he's just got to hope that once he gets in, he can show what he did for Forest. I think Spence could make that his own, that spot. Yeah. He'll win Conte round.
We'll have to see. This is what was interesting. I think we've looked at there. You isolate those teams, as we said there, right? And you're maybe going to include 1, maybe 2 of those players outside those top 5 or 6 teams. So what about spending? What about where you spend your money in position? What this chart shows, and apologies, I didn't get the account that posted this up. I know, again, so I can't give you a plug. If you're out there, I do apologise in advance. I'm not sure who this was, but it was an interesting graph which basically plots points per game last season against the various positions and price points. And obviously on the podcast you're not seeing this, but effectively it shows the forwards delivering less value per million in terms of points per million than any other position. That's something we know about already. They're behind midfielders, they're behind defenders, and they're behind goalkeepers. But what's interesting here is things like, your 5.5 forward delivers less than your 5.5 midfielder, and definitely less than even the 5.5 keepers and defenders. 5.5 keepers and defenders about even. For forwards then, you've got to go into the 10 million plus bracket before they start to get to the point where they compete for points per game with the midfielders. It's stuff we knew, but it's quite interesting to see it visualised like this, isn't it?
No, it absolutely is. Yeah, I mean, the defenders you look at someone like Dean and Cash, or Trippier, who we're going to talk about later. These 5 million defenders. I mean, you look at midfielders and forwards, there's no one that's going to get close to players like that. I mean, Cash, Dean, these could be getting 140, 150 points for 5 million. It's an absolute joke. And then you look at players like, I don't know, Tony at 7 million, Bamford at 7.5. We've mentioned all these. There's literally no comparison. I mean, the only thing that kind of salvages it in some way is that if you do load up on your 5 defenders, you've got to go with two non-playing forwards pretty much.
Yeah.
And not, and run the risk of limited flexibility. That's the kind of the trade-off between it. But realistically, the defenders are going to massively outscore the similar positions to them. But yeah, do you make that trade? I'm seeing somewhere in the middle. I'm seeing people with, I haven't seen anyone with 3 forwards really. I'm seeing lots of 5 at the back, but I think 4-4-2 is the way to go.
Yeah, interesting. I'm probably going to start with a 5 at the back and 1 forward and 2 non-playing forwards. I think that's the way I'm going to go. Yeah, just because it gives me that ability to switch between Kane and Haaland, as we'll see later on, if I want to. And then I'm going to change it up game week 5 or 6 with the wild card. Anyway, again, plan for just the first 4 or 5 game weeks. You don't have to pick your formation now for the rest of the season. No. And obviously you don't have to pick your squad now for the rest of the season either. So you've got to always remember that. But the value offered by defenders is clear. What's interesting is goalkeepers being downgraded. The top keepers have come down 0.5 from 6 to 5.5, and suddenly they're on a par with the 5.5 defenders, according to this chart. Right, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because before we would never consider a top tier goalkeeper, but now I think it does bring them into it. And I think of all the changes that FPL made this season with the pricing, I think that was the most positive for me, because it actually brought Ederson and Alisson into the argument a bit, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Alisson, I'm not really buying that. I don't think Alisson is a consideration at all, given that there's like 7 attacking players that you could go for, including the fullbacks.
Yeah.
But Ederson, definitely. I mean, if you're thinking of saving some money and not going for Cancelo, for example, but you're looking at tapping into that City defence, Ederson's 0.5 less, and there's some really good 4.5 defenders and cheap defenders that you can go for. So you can actually save money doing that. If you go for, say, Raya and Diaz, that's going to cost you 10.5. But if you go for Ederson and a 4-5, that costs you 10. So you save a bit of money and arguably have a better pick. It's just, again, flexibility. You can move. I mean, you could potentially move Diaz on or something like that. Maybe Cucurella does sign, and you can move him down, for example, where you're stuck with Ederson. But then you're only for 6 weeks.
Well, you're not stuck. No, as I said, because exactly. By game week 18, you'll be on your 3rd keeper. So this is why I think Ederson's actually a very good buy, and he's in my team at the moment. Because what also he gives you is a bank of money, right? And you know that if it gets to game week 3 and 4 and there's a bandwagon and you're 0-1 short, you know you can spend 4 points and swap that keeper down to a 5 or 4-5 most likely. You wouldn't want to do it because you don't want to make a keeper transfer. But if the what's his name hits the fan and you go, I've got to find 0-1, if you've got Ederson in goal, you know you can afford to step down and free up some money. Whereas otherwise, it could be more painful to try and free up some money. I mean, there is, we'll look at keepers now. There is normally very little between the 4-5 keepers and the top tier keepers. There's always 1 or 2 that kind of bridge the gap. So I think over the start of the season, Ederson won't be far. I don't think Ederson will be miles off one of the 4-5s, right? Over the entire season, he'll probably be 20, 30 points ahead, right? So he will win out over the season because City will keep 19, 20 clean sheets. For sure, I would have thought. So I think if you're looking short term, I think Ederson's a good bet because he gives you that bank of money you can come down off if you need to, if there's an emergency, and you're going to change it with your wild card 5 or 6 anyway, and you can change again later on with the World Cup. So I think with the downgrading price, I think Ederson definitely a good option now.
I think of all the player positions, they really did nail the goalkeepers. Because I've always just had a 4.5 and never really considered anything else. But I think there's good options in the 5 million bracket. Mendy's really popular, or you can go up to 5.5. There should never be a 6 million keeper. You're just never going to kind of go there. So yeah, I like it. I think maybe Lloris could have been 5. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think they've done really well with that.
Yeah. So looking at player data over the season, I'm showing points by. Well, it's ranked by FPL value, and it just mirrors that graph there. You can see the keepers and defenders are by far and away the best value players. Obviously, this is going to favour players who played a lot of games, who scored a lot of points. So don't go buying players off necessarily. This is just to illustrate the point about defenders and keepers. You've got to go down to the 30th place player, which is James Ward-Prowse, before a midfielder creeps into the reckoning with 24.46 points per million. Right, so it's this just illustrates it, doesn't it? And then the best forward is Tony in 75th spot, 19.86. It just shows you the gap in terms of value you get from your forwards and the rest of the positions, particularly defenders and keepers, right?
Yeah, I mean it's embarrassing, isn't it? And I think they didn't they didn't factor that in enough with the forwards. They didn't bring them down to the level in which we would really start considering them. I mean, you make Tony 6'5", for example, you make Bamford 6'5", you bring these guys down to the kind of defender level, and they've reduced the price of defenders, if anything. Cash and Dean were 5'5", and now they're 5. And,
Creswell's 5 as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Cash is the second highest value player, on this list with his new price tag. So yeah, I think you've got to take that in consideration. I mean, obviously the big guns are going to be important for us, but the defenders let you get in those big names, and that's why 5 at the back is so popular, because of what it lets you do to the rest of your team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously now, if you sort by points per 90, it's a very different set of players, because this isn't favouring those who play many, many games. It isn't like ever presence at the top. It's purely on points that the players got per 90 minutes. And then you obviously start to see a bigger variety of players. And that's where Salah and De Bruyne and Son really come into their own. So this is the stat that you're going to use to pick your team. But I think in terms of structuring your team, FPL value and the value offered by defenders is a key thing, isn't it? Basically, that's the lesson learned, if anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some interesting names on there. I see Torres making an appearance on BlackBox.
Oh, I should have deleted him. Damn. I've deleted all the players who are no longer in the Premier League, and I've missed Torres. It's almost like I've got a blind spot for Torres, eh? What's that about?
I know. But it's really, I mean, again, this list is great, because it shows you, just because these players haven't played. I mean, Chilwell's right at the top of the list, for example, 6 starts, best points per 90. Of any player in those 6 stars. But you look at like Sterling's on here. He's had this move now. Kulusevski, Lingard's on there.
Yeah, well. Funny that, isn't it? Only mentioned number 6 of the show so far.
I know. Yeah, Mahrez, for example. I mean, people might think that he's going to play more now that Jesus is gone and Sterling's out. So there's a lot of players on this list in which circumstances meant that they might play, maybe more or have more prominent roles in their side. Kulusevski case is a bit of the unknown. But yeah, you'd expect a lot of players to actually kick on from this. So it's good to look back and have the knowledge of who's going to do well next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some interesting players on here. What do you make of Visser down in 18th? 6.44 points per game. He started 12 matches, 7 goals, 2 assists. Under the radar a bit, really.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked him as a 5-5 option. Brentford's fixtures are kind of okay. I was looking at Tony, a bit put off by Tony because they haven't signed this new kind of number 10. This is really cheap. It's just Traore, Neto, isn't it? Neto is just such an obvious 5-5, goal and assist in pre-season already. Playing kind of as a striker in that role. He's just definitely underpriced, and Wolves' fixtures are so good. So I guess it's useful if maybe you're thinking about 3 premiums. If you're thinking Salah, Kane or Haaland and Son, maybe, and you're going to go with 2 cheaps. Visser is probably the next in line for that. But really, I think Neto is just a better pick.
And Sterling surprised me. 6.89 points per 90. Never, ever came into our reckoning at all last season, because of the fact that he only started 23 games, in and out of that City team, never consistent in the runs that he had. But he still delivered 13 goals and 7 assists and 6.89 points per 90. If he can take that to Chelsea and be largely ever present, which is what I expect, he's got to be a factor, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I think 20 goal involvements for any player in the league is amazing, is brilliant. And for him to have got 20, barely have been trusted, really. I know he's playing for City, you kind of got to take it into account, but he's then had a big price drop, got a big move somewhere else. I mean, it can't have been easy for Pep to let him go, because he delivers in every season. He gets these numbers. He hasn't been at his best for a while now, but look at him in the Euros for England. He's clearly still got it. Still got that absolute potential that Pep loved. I mean, he was Pep's boy, wasn't he, for so long? Obviously, just wanted more money or wanted, better security of starts or something that couldn't be offered by Pep. But I'm sure that will have been a really, really reluctant sale. And I'm sure Sterling's going to go on and try and show that he should never have been released and should have just been given what he wanted.
I am tempted, I am tempted. Yeah. Interesting, down the bottom, 47th, Saka, 5.41 points per 90. Martinelli, 5.33, just behind him, and yet there's 2 million difference. How are you seeing those two? Because that's quite a crucial question. Because if you can be happy with going Martinelli over Saka, that 2 million difference can make a big effect on your team, right?
It absolutely can. There's no. Well, I mean, people know this already. There's no danger with Saka, is there? Like he's going to play every game, and Martinelli's competing with Smith Rowe. We are going to see Nketiah feature as well. He's just signed this new contract. does he pair them up? Does it go Jesus and catch up front? Does he, Jesus can play on the right? Could he even play on the left? I don't know. I just worry a bit about Martinelli's kind of. I mean, the thing with Martinelli gives is just so much energy down that left hand side. Like, he is important to the way Arteta sets up, and I do expect him to start the majority of games. 6 million is a good price for him. You could do a lot worse. I like him as an option. I can see why he's so popular, but there's always going to be that element of 1 or 2 bad games. Smith Rowe comes in, does well, he's out of the picture. Arteta likes to stick with players who are playing well, giving them a chance. So I expect him to start, but he's always going to be 1 or 2 bad gaming weeks away. Look up Smith Rowe; he always scores off the bench, doesn't he?
Might get pens though, Martinelli, early on. I think he's a good bet for the first few 4 game weeks. I think
Jesus. I think
Jesus wild card. Do you? Yeah, you'd have thought so. You'd have thought so, but it's not absolutely certain, and that that's the thing. Right, let's look at some ownership. We'll start with goalkeepers and defenders. Goalkeepers at the moment, the top goalkeeper there, 5 million, is Mendy. 26.4% ownership. Then it's Alisson on 5.5, and Ederson is full 5.5 as well. So it's Mendy on 26.4%, Alisson 18.8, Ederson 14.1, and in between Alisson and Ederson there's Sanchez on 14.3. The expensive keepers, or the elite keepers if you like, are really, really popular. It's just going back to what we said earlier about the pricing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the price for Mendy is really interesting at 5, because I think, realistically, you want to kind of keep those spots clear for James, Chilwell, Mount, Sterling. That's the 4 options. You've got Havertz there kind of as well. I mean, that's 5 good options in the rest of the team. So by getting in Mendy, you're limiting yourself to be able to jump on one of those. So that's the kind of trade-off. He doesn't make many saves. We've talked about his kind of points as being a little bit disappointing, but he did go off to AFCON as well. You'd expect him to do quite well. He's just not for me because of that lack of flexibility in some of the other spots. I think Chelsea are a team that I just don't really know what we're going to see next season. I think Rudiger is a big loss for them in defence as well. I know Koundé's coming in. I know Koulibaly is like an elite defender, but it's still a big adjustment to lose a defender of that kind of calibre. So I don't know. I'm a bit worried about Chelsea defensively, and I think with Chilwell and James, it doesn't even matter. You're just going to get such relentless attacking sort of swagger from them. So I'd still much prefer those two, but I can see why people are going for Mendy.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of points per 90, Alisson's right up there, 4.89 last season. Ederson's on 4.19. Kepa and Begovic, who only played 4 and 3 starts respectively. So in terms of points per 90, it's Alisson, Ederson, Lloris, and Gaeta. How did I have him through his most disastrous period? And he does.
I still can't believe he's on there because he never seemed to get points.
Clean sheets at the end. They got 6 in the last 9, I think, or something silly.
Right. Yeah.
So basically, the XG that I was following mid-season or early season didn't come in until the end. Obviously, I'd moved off then. I'd moved to Ramsdale. I got that completely wrong, didn't I? So looking at this data here, like obviously we know the big team keepers, Liverpool, City, are going to keep the most clean sheets, probably likely again. Those 2 keepers are going to do well. You're not going to have Alisson because of the Liverpool attack. Ederson for me is the best bet because I don't think you're going to go Cancelo. Are you going to go for 2 City attackers other than Cancelo? I don't think so. I think you're going to go for Haaland or De Bruyne. You're not going to have more than one of those. Not going to have both of them, are you? So I think the Ederson slot's the easiest one to fit in if you're not going Mendy. Out of the 5 million keepers, where would you go? Because Ramsdale's tempted me. I've had him in and out over the summer so far. Arsenal's start is so good, but the issue there is like, do you want to have 3 Arsenal slots in the outfield open to you, given that there are players like Zinchenko now and Gabriel, and then you've got your Saka, Martinelli, and you've got your Jesus. So does that override Ramsdale as an option at 5 million?
Yeah, I can't see myself going with like, ever having, Ramsdale and then 2 Arsenal things and being like, oh no, I really want to get another one. I think, if you've got Saka and you've got Ramsdale, that's probably you kind of covered. I mean, Jesus obviously is there as well. That's your kind of 3.
Yeah, similar to Ederson, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to go, I really want Ben White or I really want, Martinelli and Saka and Jesus. So I don't really think that's too much of an issue. I think more of the issue is Arsenal kind of defensively. We're not really too sure what that centre-back pairing is going to be. Saliba's back now. White was playing a bit of right back because Tomiyasu has picked up a knock or is injured.
Yeah, he's got a knock.
So, yeah. And I mean, Ramsdale was so poor at the end of last season as well. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a bit of a wait and see on Arsenal for me. I think those two first games they've got as well are tough. Palace away and then Leicester. That's not as easy as it kind of maybe seems. They've got a really good run after that. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm happy to kind of wait on Arsenal for those two games and see how they kind of set up. So I won't go for him. I think I'd prefer Sarr at 5. But I don't think there's a big enough difference between Sarr and Sanchez and Raya. I think I'll just save that 0.5 and go for one of those. But at 5, I'd probably pick Sarr.
Yeah, so you're looking at a 4-5 keeper then at the moment, and of those, you prefer Raya, even with Brentford's defensive injuries, because I think Pinnock's out now, isn't he? They've already
signed Ben Mee.
They have signed Ben Mee, but
Big
again, he's hardly had a pre-season with them, right? So, okay, he's going to get one friendly before he starts. But I just look at Brentford and worry about the defence, given the injuries they've had over the summer. I don't know.
I mean, Sanchez is the kind of other option. He's kind of that kind of quietly consistent.
Such a sleepy,
defender.
unsexy pick, isn't it, Sanchez?
He really is. Yeah. I mean, Brentford have got Fulham and Everton in 3 and 4, which I like the look of. Palace in 5. I know Palace are a good defensive side, but I do sort of wonder about them as a real kind of attacking unit. So I like I like 3 out of 5 of Brentford's first fixtures. Brighton's are good. They've got United in Gameweek 1 and West Ham in 3. But then outside of that, Newcastle, Leeds, and Fulham, there could be some clean sheets there. So yeah, I'm kind of undecided. I also not for the first 5, but after the wild card, I like the look of Henderson as well at Forest.
Yeah,
Henderson
definitely
at Sheffield United, but you're probably not going to consider him for those first 5.
Yeah.
Forest got Newcastle, West Ham, Spurs, and City. It's a really tough run for you first opening 5.
I think the goalkeeper position is one of those positions you look to nail with that first wild card, which is why I'm favouring going Ederson and then getting Data and then switching to a lower value keeper after that. Because I think, for me, Johnston at Palace is going to be one that I'm looking at. He's 4-5. We don't know who the Palace keeper is going to be. I think it will be Johnston. And Palace, we know, are strong defensively in terms of XG. The issue with Palace is set pieces, I think. They've got to get that right. I think if we see signs that they're not as weak as they were at set plays, I think the Palace keeper at 4-5, whoever that is, could be really useful. And like you say, Henderson will come into it on that run from game week 6 onwards. So I think I'm going to go in bigger on the keeper to start with, but then look to scale back with the wild card.
I mean, do you think there's going to be a big difference between like Ederson and one of the 4.5s just in those opening 5 or 6? I mean, you look at Raya, for example. I mean, if he does keep a clean sheet, makes a load of saves, that's going to be like 11, 12 points, something like that. You know, we've seen, you know what kind of these keepers can do. Whereas Ederson's going to pick up kind of consistent returns, but it's early in the season. You never really know how fit teams are and
but
things.
Look at City's fixtures, first 5. I've got them up on the screen now. West Ham away, yeah, that's tough. Right, they might concede there. They're not going to concede at home to Bournemouth. Might concede away to Newcastle. Might. Not going to concede at home to Palace. Not going to concede at home to Forest. There's 3 clean sheets there. I would say 90% that 3 clean sheets, and there's probably going to be 4. Right. So you look at Brentford and you go, Leicester away, maybe. Man United at home, maybe. Fulham away, yeah, probably. That's probably their best chance. Everton at home is probably their best chance.
The difference is though,
so there's 1 or 2 for Brentford.
You don't need 5 clean sheets for 4.5 Raya though. All you need is for them to keep a clean sheet against United, for him to pick up 11 points, and then he matches Ederson for.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's interesting because it's such a small window. You know, if it's over the season, you know, it might be a bit different, but you know, we do see these cheap goalkeepers getting close to the other goal. There's never really a huge amount.
You do, but I would say it's very difficult. We don't know right now, sitting here now, who the best kind of the medium level teams like your Southampton, Palace, Brighton, Brentford. I have no idea which of those is going to be the tightest at the start of the season. I'd probably say Brighton. If I had to go a 4-5, I'd go, because we know by reputation Potter's teams are quite organised and tight. Brentford could be, but because of the injuries and the fact they're going to start with 2 new centre-backs probably that they haven't had last season or most of pre-season, I don't know. So if there was I mean, Melio would probably be the one I'd look at because they've got Wolves, Southampton, Brighton and Everton. I think they've got 2 or 3 and it's the same argument, right? If you know you don't need clean sheets and it's save points, I prefer Melio over the first 5 to Raya myself because of the
I mean, they will concede every game, Leeds. Whereas I think Brentford at least got a chance if things kind of click.
I don't know. Wolves at home, don't know, Southampton away. Yeah, they probably will. I don't think there's much in those Leeds fixtures versus Brentford. If Brentford had a fully fit defence, which was the same back 5 or 4, and that's the other thing, they're moving from a back 5 to a back 4, we think, this season. So what we saw last season isn't necessarily what we're going to see this season in terms of protection Ray has got. So that, there's just, to me, Brentford have got so many unknowns. I'm not convinced I can put my flag in Raya as, he's going to be as good as an Ederson for those first 5 games. I'd rather get to game week 6 and then see what the data tells me. I'm definitely going to come off Ederson. But
it's interesting. I'm the kind of opposite. I'm just hoping that I can hit the right 4.5, for those first 5, use the money wisely kind of elsewhere. I don't hate either option. That's the thing. I'm not massively against your strategy. I'm just hoping that I can hit the right one, and because it's either going to be Sanchez or Raya for me.
Yeah.
And if I can hit the right one, and if there's like 5 points in it between him and Ederson, for save points and bonus and all that kind of stuff, which Ederson never really gets, then I'll take that.
Yeah, I think for me, I just want to play safe and get points in the bank, and then go off the data. I might not though. It's just at the moment, obviously, if Cucurella signs and he's 5 million and I fancy that, then I might come off it. I'm not going to have more than, I'm going to have Cancelo, and I'm probably going to have another City defender in there, but I'm not going to have, Ederson, Cucurella and Cancelo. So I might come off. I don't know. And I'm, we'll look at my team in a bit, but at the moment I'm going with that. It's the keepers is a really tough position. I think bringing that 0.5 off the top there, as we said, is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? It's changed our view completely. Going to defenders then, no surprise, Trent, 54.6 ownership, Cancelo 45%, James 44. I'm surprised that James is as close to Cancelo as he is, because normally ownership goes off the back of points from the previous season, and Cancelo, and obviously James missed a lot of games, and therefore the points gap is big. So the new player, I guess at this stage though, we're not looking at, the ownership isn't made up of new FPL players. It's made up of managers who have played FPL for many, many seasons, because the new FPL managers come in the last week. So I think the gap between Cancelo and James will probably open up at that point, because at the moment, I think the managers picking these players are managers who played FPL for several seasons and know there's not much gap, or perhaps there might not be much gap between Reece James and João Cancelo. Perisic 36%, Williams as the 4 million defender, Nico at 21%. Perisic 36 surprises me, because you said earlier about the pod you did with Neil and the doubts over Conte and the minutes of wing backs. I mean, surely that's got to be a concern, particularly when Europe kicks in after game week 6. Perisic is going to probably come off in every game, I would have thought, with the 5 subs, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 million people in FPL now, and I think this list does show that that's a 3 million of people who kind of know what they're doing these days, because it's not just a list of the best points. I mean, James, Perisic, Neco Williams is there at 21%, so people already know that he's the best option. 21% of 3 million is a lot of people. I mean, Trippier's on there, for example, at 5. People know that he's a good option, even though he barely played last season. So yeah, I think it is. I mean, Perisic is someone who I really wanted, because I love me a wing back, especially from a Conte system. But yeah, Neil did a very good job of kind of explaining how many times he got subbed before 60 minutes Inter under Conte, how demanding that position is, with Europe, all that kind of stuff. The fact that there's like 10 wing backs at that club, and they want more. Apparently, I read today they're after another wing back. You got to think he's gonna have his minutes managed. I mean, he can do a hell of a lot of damage in the time he's on the pitch. So he's so attacking. Like, his shooting numbers for Inter were absolutely kind of outrageous. So you might not even need him to play 60 minutes to get something. But it's a good price, 5.5. But I don't think I'll be going there.
No, I don't think I will. He's been in and out. I've flirted with him all season, all pre-season rather. But yeah, I mean, Cash and Trippier. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the managers in FPL at the moment, 3 million, know exactly what they're doing. Hence the fact that Cash and Trippier are in there. Trippier has got no points on the board from last season, really. No. But obviously, when we look at the data, he is definitely one to pick, because his points per game is very strong, and his non-penalty XG is very strong for a player who only played a handful of games because of injury. Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think this will change up in the last week when more players come flooding into the game, and then we'll see perhaps some gaps appear, and players with more points last season will start edging up in ownership, because FPL players who are new to the game will look at that as their guide, whereas at the moment people aren't doing that.
There's sorry.
Go on, carry on.
I was going to say, there's some notable kind of numbers here, though. I mean, some of them aren't even on this list. I mean, Dean's 4% owned, for example. Cash is 20.9. To me, that's a real 50-50 call, but it's not being borne out in ownership because Cash is kind of so much higher than Dean is. Robertson at 10% ownership as well is really low. And that's because people are going Trent, Diaz and Salah, like we're seeing. So Robertson, again, big differential. And I wouldn't be surprised if Robertson outscored Diaz this season, even though he's a million less in defence because he's got those clean sheets to kind of fall back on. So, yeah, interesting one between those two. I had another one as well, but I can't remember who it was.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, if you look at the table we've got now with the points per 90, Chilwell, as we saw earlier, is top 9.13. He only started 6 games, but he got 3 goals and 1 assist in those 6 games. Then we got Doherty, who could or could not be a factor this season, 6.89. Had that purple patch when he came into the team, and he got the 9 starts. Then it's Reece James, then it's Robertson, then it's Trent. The top 3, well, 2 of the top 3 owned defenders there, Reece James and Trent. Robertson is the outlier, 10% owned, as you said, currently, but 6.6 points per 90, which is stronger than Diaz. And I think with a million less, personally, I'm on Team Robertson over Diaz.
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is if you go with Robertson, you're basically because you're going to have Trent, Cancelo, and one of James or Chilwell, so that's 3.
Yeah,
and then if you go Robertson as well, that's 4. That's a good mid, and then you can kind of have Williams. But then a lot of people are looking at other players. I mean, Zinchenko was the one I was going to mention. Just signed for Arsenal for 35 million at 5. Dean there at 5. Trippier. I mean, you can easily go 5 at the back. With these guys, but then you kind of have that flexibility issue that we mentioned earlier, and I think that's what you do if you go for Robertson as well. Then I think you pretty much are going for 5 at the back. I haven't seen too many 4 at the back teams with Robertson as well, but yeah, I definitely don't hate it. I'm really surprised that he's 10% owned. I think people are. Diaz is a great price, don't get me wrong, but Robertson is a consistent near 200 point player.
Yeah, and
Diaz have to have a worldie to get close to that.
And expected minutes as well. You would have thought that Robertson will finish more games than Diaz. I mean, we might see Klopp rotate rest his wing backs in games. We might see that. I remember at Watford before a European tie last season. I had Jota in my team and he was on the bench for Liverpool, and I thought, well, he must come on because he's going to rest one of Mane or Salah or Firmino, and he didn't. He took both Robertson and Trent off in that game with 10 minutes to go. And I wonder if that's a vision of what we're going to see this season with the 5 subs, in that Trent and Robertson will come off regularly. Probably more so Robertson because they've got Tsimikas, who's a bit more of a like for like, whereas Gomez for Trent is a gap. There's a bigger gap, I think, certainly in creativity. But I wonder whether those two will get 75, 80 minutes rather than the 90 that we're used to seeing. But I still would back Robertson to get more minutes than Diaz.
For sure.
Because of the attack.
I agree.
I mean, with Jota injured, maybe not. It depends on Jota injury, doesn't it? But I think over the season, Robertson's going to get more minutes for sure. Okay, let's look at midfield and attack ownership. No surprise, Salah 57.6. I'm shocked, though, that Jesus in forwards is owned by 60.5 and more than Salah. And again, that indicates to me that the managers in the game at the moment are managers who are following the pre-season, who are following non-penalty XG, which Jesus does very well for. They're not just managers who, are going for Salah because he's got the most points last season. I know Salah's a good player in FPL. They're informed managers who are being affected by what's happening pre-season, which is why Jesus is owned so many. Diaz 30.1. There's a big gap.
I haven't had him a single draft.
We haven't tried Jesus at all.
I'm not interested.
Go on, tell me about your view on Jesus then. You don't see it.
I think from game week 3, yes. But like I said, I think those first 2 games for Arsenal are really tricky. And I think, he's so highly owned. I'm looking for ways in which I can differentiate a little bit from the kind of template like I try and do. And I think Palace away, game week 1, Leicester at home, game week 2. If he doesn't do well in those first 2 games and he's 60.5% owned, we could see him at 7-8.
Yeah, that's the danger, isn't it? When you're looking at a high-owned player, they've got to perform. Otherwise, people are going to get off them pretty quick. Exactly. And I think the danger with Jesus is if there's managers out there who went Jesus and a budget striker, a 6 million striker, and then Haaland and Kane bang it in for the first 2 or 3 games, they would move to Haaland and Kane anyway, even if Jesus has scored a goal or 2. Because if Kane and Haaland get a hat-trick, we're going to see Jesus sales, aren't we? Because people are going to panic and go, I've got to get one of Kane and Haaland.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a difficult kind of sort of thing to sort of pin your mast to. Is that the saying? Something like that. You said put a flag in earlier.
Yeah.
So you put a flag in. Because I think Jesus is a really good price. I think 8 million. There's not too many forwards. I think 8 million is a good price. I'm expecting him to do well and have a good season. But it's just purely I don't really like those first two games. So I'm looking at something a bit different. But I don't begrudge anyone. I can't believe though he's 60.5% owned. I can't believe it's that. Not with Saka there as well, 8 million at the same price. You know, the investment people could be making with Diaz at 8, you know, with Salah, with Haaland or Kane. I'm just surprised that he is that high. But I think it just shows just the lack of forwards really more than anything else.
No, I mean he's definitely a good pick. I'm not doubting that. It depends on your formation and it depends what you're willing to spend in your front line. I think if you're going to go Jesus, it's hard to also get Kane and Haaland in as well, unless you're spending. Obviously, you'd have to be spending quite a bit up front, and then you're going lighter at the back. And for me, that's where I think the value is, as we saw earlier in the show. There's such value in defence. I'm reluctant to skinny in defence. I want to spend there, which means I can't get a lineup with a Haaland and a Jesus or a Kane and a Jesus. I just don't see it. And midfield traditionally has been where we've put our money as well. Yeah. So I think it's very difficult.
He's a very, very, very good player, very industrious player, but he's not a clinical striker. And he's playing, I mean, don't get me wrong, Martinelli, Odegaard, all these players are very, very good players, but it's not De Bruyne and Mahrez feeding him. And like there's people in the chat now saying that he's like essential and that you need him. I'm just not buying into that really. It's a new team. It's not as good quality around him. He's gonna be, you know, industrious again, like he has been. Nketiah's there as well. We might be playing up top with him. I don't know if that's a good thing for him or a bad thing. I want to see him for a few games and just see exactly what he looks like in that Arsenal side. I don't think he's a must. I really don't.
I think the reason why I'm cool on him is because, again, if I'm going to pay the wildcard 5 or 6, I'd rather go a Kane or a Haaland because they're the players who I think could really do heavy damage to me if I don't have them.
Yeah.
Is Jesus going to bang in a hat trick? Is he going to get 5 or 6 goals in those first 4 or 5 games? He might.
Probably is now after I've said that.
He might, but I think if you're betting on one of the 3 forwards, if you're saying, okay, of these 3 forwards, Kane, Haaland, Jesus, what of those could do the biggest damage to my team if I don't have them? You ain't going to go Jesus for that player, are you?
No.
Right. So the only appeal you've got of going, if you're going one up front, the only appeal you've got Jesus is you can spend money elsewhere. For me, if you're going one up front like me, you go with one of Kane and Haaland. And if you're playing 2 up front, you go a 6 million striker. You don't go Kane and Haaland and Jesus. But clearly, a lot of people are going with that, right? A lot of people are going Jesus and a 6 million maybe, or Jesus and a Haaland or Kane. And you know, the data I'm showing now, you can see why. In terms of points per 90, Jesus was right up there with 21 starts. He got 8 goals, 8 assists, and also his non-penalty XG per 90. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention our stats have changed from minutes per to per 90 this season, haven't they? So you would have noticed that. He has got 0.65 XGI non-penalty per 90. So that's expected goal involvements, non-penalty per 90, 0.65. That is as good as it gets. Only Jota has got higher than that amongst the forwards in this chart. And Jota, of course, was a midfielder last season, but has come into the forward line. He's injured, and with Núñez there, he's not really a factor, I don't believe. So in terms of non-penalty XGI, he's as good as it gets, right? But he was in a City team that you would create more for him, you would have thought, than an Arsenal team.
Yeah, it's first of all. Just to mention on the 90 minutes as well. I mean, hopefully this is a much clearer way of displaying it, which is why we've done it. Because if you remember before, it was XGI, and it was like 128.6, and it was quite hard to kind of categorize. Whereas now, because it's in kind of 0.10 blocks, you can basically say anyone that's getting an XGI per 90 over 0.6 is like elite. That is like you say, that's the kind of goal stand. That's what you're looking for in your kind of attacking players. I mean, not to say that 0.4 and 0.5 isn't really good, but 0.6 is like, okay, we've got to stand up and take note of this person. And the fact Jesus is there is encouraging for the people that are going with him. It's just whether that can carry on at Arsenal. definitely on my watch list. I'm not going to be stubborn about it. That's my that's my biggest thing is that if he looks good in the first 2 games and he looks amazing in pre-season, don't get me wrong. If he's going into game week 3 and I haven't got him and he's been looking sharp, I'll be making the move. I won't be stubborn. You can remind me of that, hopefully.
But it's like you said as well. I mean, Saka is the surest bet in that Arsenal team for me. He's the one who's going to start most games, and he might get taken off, but I don't think he's going to get taken off first. I think Jesus probably is going to be taken off amongst the first 2 subs because they've got Nketiah and they're going to give him minutes. I can't see Nketiah starting many matches over the first 3 or 4. I think it's going to be largely Martinelli, Jesus and Saka. And they've got Vieira now as well, who can also play wide. I mean, we don't really know what that front 3 is going to be, but I think Nketiah is going to start most games in the first 4 or 5 on the bench. And when you've got Nketiah straining at the leash, surely the most likely player he's going to replace is going to be Jesus. Yeah, or Jesus moves wide, and in which case, do you want Jesus wide anyway? Right? Would you rather, if you're going to have a wide Arsenal player, you're going to have Saka, so same price as well. So it's the key thing you get with Saka is nothing's going to change. His role isn't going to change, and I think every other Arsenal player are going to see their roles change because they brought Vieira in, they brought Jesus in, and the system is going to adapt around those 2. I mean, Odegaard, for example, he might become a better option because we might see him push further up and dropping back and having that kind of pivot. But Saka, you know what you're going to get. You know you're going to get someone who's probably going to push on and get 160, 170 points next season and might have penalties. We don't know. We literally don't know who's going to be taking them. One thing I want to touch on here as well, going back to the ownership. Haaland 60%, Kane 19.8. I am very surprised at that. I mean, that is purely based off the hype that Haaland has created from his reputation he's gained in the Bundesliga. And I get it. But you would have thought with the stock that Kane has brought, has gained in the Premier League and the fact that he had another strong season last time out, that the gap wouldn't be that big. Are we being dazzled by Haaland as a new player, or do you think there is that kind of gap there?
I think people are just excited, aren't they? I mean, he's such a massive signing for the Premier League to come in. I'm so glad he didn't go to like Madrid or something like that. It's so going to be so exciting to see him in the league. And there is that kind of romanticism about it, isn't there? You play FPL because you want, you want to watch Haaland just sort of tear through the first like 5 games and just destroy everyone and score like 20 goals. It's just kind of what you want to see. So I'm not really surprised. Kane disappointed a lot of people last season. Really poor first half. Never really matched Son either, even though I told you that he would do. And kind of, broke my heart particularly because I didn't have Son for that run. I don't know about Kane. Kane's an interesting one. I mean, if I'm picking between Son and Kane, I'm picking Son absolutely every day between them. I'm not massively sold on Kane, but I do think this news on Haaland that Pep's given, the fact he hasn't played pre-season yet, the fact there are these knocks and niggles, the fact he said that he wanted to go to Madrid because they would rest him more or something.
Yeah, that was utterly bizarre, wasn't it?
Really weird. And there's, some assurances that he's going to be given, have his minutes. There's a couple of little things that are just making me think, okay, this is another kind of Jesus example of this is a very, very highly owned player who maybe I can go against for the first few weeks and have a look at. And Kane is someone I'm looking at now when I wasn't really before. Kane over Haaland. Or De Bruyne as well. I think De Bruyne now, he scored 2 amazing goals in pre-season. Pep said he's fully fit and back to his best. That's the complete opposite of Haaland. Yep. So he definitely interests me.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been on Haaland in pre-season because there's so many, again, there's factors. And we said when we did the end of season post-mortem, I worry about Haaland's fitness. What we've read in the Athletic article, the quotes that come out there from Pep, just indicate that the player himself is worried about fatigue and the injury-prone state that he's been in previous seasons in the Bundesliga. The demands he's going to come under, particularly when the European games come in as well, you've got to think he's going to play those European ties. So in the games where City think they can afford to rest him, they're either not going to start him or they're going to bring him off early. Kane, by comparison, if you're going to look at the heavy hitters and you're going to go, which one's going to get me the most minutes over the first 6 game weeks and over the season? So in other words, which one is the least likely to be subbed off? It's Kane. Who comes on for Kane? Richarlison maybe, but I can't see it. Kane's going to play most 90 minutes, I would have thought, because they haven't really got a light for light. Richarlison's the nearest they've got, but I would have thought Richarlison's already on the pitch for one of Kulusevski's son anyway by the time it gets to the 80-minute mark. So I don't see Kane coming off in a game. So you're going to get, over the first 6 weeks, I reckon Kane will get you an extra 90 minutes over Haaland, because Haaland's going to be brought off with 15 minutes to go, probably in most games, and maybe not start one of them. So
it's a really interesting one, because you've got the X-Mins, which are massively on the side of Kane. But what we didn't see from Kane last season was him really scoring huge hauls with goals and getting braces and hat tricks. He was assisting a lot of goals. He was dropping deeper a lot, and that kind of thing. And there is always that chance that Haaland just comes in and De Bruyne is on point, Mahrez is on point, and he just converts everything. I mean, Pep's already said, like I said earlier, get the ball into him in the box, let him do his thing. If that's the case, it's going to be so hard to overlook him for Kane, because you see them both. Both in the lineup, and you're going to be thinking, "Oh, I wish I could."
But the thing is, Haaland's going to come up against the lowest of low blocks in the Premier League, week in, week out. And City, he's not. I've always listened to what Pep says when he comes up against low block teams. Is he likes his most agile, nimble, fast-footed players. Right? He liked his Silvers, he liked his Bernardos. He likes his Fodens in those games. Those are the games where he knows and Sterling, right? Those are the games where he knows he needs those agile, quick-footed players to unlock the low block. Haaland, for all his qualities, is not one of those players, right? He is a player who's powerful, full of pace, full of strength. He's a beast of a player, but he's not the first player I think of in that City team to think, well, if anyone's going to unblock this low block, it's going to be Haaland. I would more look to Grealish or Mahrez with the trickery and skill than I would Haaland with his power and pace. He has got skill, he's got a great first touch, of course, but I don't think it's in the league of a David Silva or Bernardo Silva, right? So, or Foden. So I think that I want to see how that works first of all, because yes, for Dortmund he would have come against low blocks, but not like he's going to come up against playing for City. It's like from the off, Bournemouth at home, Bournemouth are going to be like on the edge of their penalty area from the start, and it's not the kind of game, therefore, that Haaland's pace and power are going to come into it. It's going to be about, can they supply him? And teams are just going to congest the middle of the pitch, so it's not going to be easy. I want to see it before I start committing to it. Whereas Kane, we know what we're going to get. We know absolutely what we're going to get. Look at last season. I've got the data up last season. Yeah, he wasn't as prolific in terms of goals, but he still had his best season for 4 seasons in terms of big chance per 90, 0.92. compared to 0.88 the previous season. So he was getting big chances still. And in terms of, big chance created, he was up there. XGI non-penalty per 90, his best season over the last 4, 0.62. So the data doesn't scream of Kane's in decline in every aspect. So that's another reason why I think just Kane over Haaland to start with, and then give it some time. I mean, the only fear is Haaland goes crazy and his price goes through the roof.
Oh yeah, this is it. It's very interesting with Guardiola and strikers as well, because you look at the strikers he's had over his years as manager, and he's had some absolutely amazing ones. I mean, he kind of took Aguero to the next level. For example, he's managed like Lewandowski, who's maybe of a similar mold to Haaland in that sense. But then, I mean, you look at Aguero, you look at Messi, who's played in that role. You look at David Villa in that role, Alexis Sanchez, all these guys. These are all kind of like slight build players. Foden played there last season, for example. So apart from Lewandowski, who was absolutely incredible under Pep, we haven't really seen him use that kind of big, strong target man forward.
No.
And yeah, we talked about, didn't we, on an episode earlier about Haaland and his kind of adapting into the role. There is definitely going to be some adapting he'll need to do.
Yeah, gotta be, surely. And we haven't. What has he had pre-season? Hardly anything yet. So,
the comments have put me off. Honestly, those comments from Pep. I try not to put too much stock in the pre-season. And we've got the Community Shield.
Yeah,
if he plays in that and scores in that, it's going to be like, whoa, okay, maybe we need to move for him. But from what I've seen, you can only go with the information that you have here, right now. And the information tells me Haaland is someone who we can possibly ignore.
Yeah, and like I said, because we've got that wild card that we know is going to come in 5 or 6, you can wait and see. Unless Haaland's played, like Kane would have to have a miserable start to the season. What are the chances that Kane's not going to score in August? But he'd have to have a miserable start to the season and Haaland to really blow the door off. And I think Spurs' fixtures are good enough where I would think, I mean, Kane's got Southampton at home first game.
No, it's game week 2 though. Bournemouth at home.
But he might not play that. We don't know. We don't know that Pep's going to go against Bournemouth at home. That's a game for Haaland. He might go, that's a game I can win without Haaland. And actually, I want my faster.
Imagine you go into Bournemouth at home without Haaland.
Well, I probably will.
And his effective ownership is 190% or whatever.
Yeah. I think you go in with Kane game. What I'm going to do is go in with Kane game at 1 and assess whether Haaland starts and whether Haaland, if he does start, is going to be the one who deals the damage to Bournemouth, or is it going to be another player?
That's my plan. Or just go De Bruyne and just ignore.
Yeah,
ignore.
Could do that. Yeah. Okay, should we look at the template team? I think otherwise we're going to run into the 3-hour territory if we're not careful.
How long have we done?
We're an hour and a half already, so we haven't got to our teams yet.
Oh, an hour and a half.
Yeah. So this you did some work, didn't you? You went out into the community and said, "Please send me your teams, please, Mister." Is that what you did?
Yeah, I'm always overwhelmed by the amount of people that reply to that message. They're not even I'm not even rating them. I'm just asking people to see them, and I had 350 to go through. Like I said earlier, I was quite impressed that there was lots of players. I think there was more players in the pool. Have I still got the spreadsheet open? Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, you got a spreadsheet behind this, have you?
I did have a spreadsheet, but I've closed it, which was dumb.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. While you find that, I'll read this out for the podcast, right? So the template, as put together by Az from the community teams he got, is Raya in goal, Trent, Cancelo, James, Trippier, Salah, Diaz, Rashford, Neto, Jesus and Haaland. And on the bench, it's Balcom, the Brentford reserve keeper, Taraya, Nico Williams, the best young right back in the country, Andreas Pereira, who's obviously gone for United to Fulham, and he's 4.5, and Greenwood, Sam Greenwood, who's might get some minutes off the bench, although Gelhardt probably preferred as the sub for Bamford. Sam Greenwood at 4.5. That's the template that you formed from the team submitted to you. How many did you get in total?
Well, I had 300 come through. I probably looked through about 100 of them and put them into the spreadsheet.
Right.
I'm just trying to, I don't know why I didn't do this. I'm just trying to calculate how many different players people looked at. It was a surprising amount. Sorry, this isn't great podding.
This is the content that they want. live Excel stuff.
I should have done this before, but my toilet broke and I was panicking.
Oh dear. You better. That'll sound odd if they haven't heard the start of the pod and you just said.
I think what was really.
You did say toilet, not waters, there, didn't you? Yeah.
I'll tell you what was really telling though, just how few strikers were being talked about. So, in goalkeeper and defence, there was 33 different defenders.
Wow, that's big. I was so bloody hell.
Goalkeepers and defenders.
That's a surprise. Right, okay. Well, that's the first shock.
In midfield, 27 different
players. Yeah.
And up front, unbelievable.
5.
7.
So outside of Jesus and Haaland, it would have been Kane, Tony, and one other. Who would it have been? Well, it probably wouldn't have been. Obviously, Greenwood would have been in there, I would have said, and probably Archer of Villa.
Oh, Greenwood. I didn't count bench players.
Oh, you didn't count bench players.
It was only first 11.
So it's Jesus, Haaland, Tony, Kane. That's
another
4.
Tony Martial.
Tony Martial, really? He's in there, is he? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mitrovic made it into a few.
Yeah, fair enough. Johnson.
And you're not Forest boy.
Yeah, Johnson.
Well.
Yeah,
Harry. But I mean, that's a pool.
Oh, and Awani was in there over Johnson.
Yeah, okay. No Johnsons, but a couple of. But yeah, that's like 100 players to consider. So
there was encouraging, isn't it?
It is encouraging, and you look at the players. The Maddison, Mount, Bowen made it into a few. All the kind of 8 million players were accepted. The kind of the real shocks to me were just how few teams had KDB and Son in. And I know that Salah and Haaland or Salah and Kane is so tempting, but Son and De Bruyne are in like a fraction of teams.
You know what?
A real fraction.
You know what I've looked at, right? I have looked at going Son and then switching to De Bruyne for the Bournemouth game. To me, that could be a really attractive option. It's whether or not. Have you looked at any teams without Salah over the summer?
I have seen a few.
It's like a confession, isn't it? My name's Chaz Phillips, and I've gone without Salah in pre-season.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, I've seen teams with just Salah and ignoring kind of the other premiums, and I feel better about it. You just have him as the perma captain. Whenever I see a team without Salah, I just go, oh, don't know about that. I don't trust, like captaincy wise, I just don't trust anyone else. I mean, Haaland, Kane, Son, De Bruyne. I don't know. I feel so safe.
We saw it, right? In that post-mortem show we did, we saw just how often Salah wasn't. He was often the most popular pick, but he wasn't often the highest scoring pick. And I think we said with lessons learned that, you've got to look at, and I look at game week 1 and I think Salah away at Fulham, great captain pick. But the difference in ownership between him and Kane, and the fact that Kane's at home to Southampton, and similar Son at home to Southampton as well, how much of a gamble is it really to go one of the Spurs players over Salah as captain for game week 1? Is it huge? Is it a huge gamble? It's a bit of a gamble, but I don't think it's a massive one. And yet that could go really nicely in your favour if you did that. So I don't know whether I would go without Salah. I mean, I imagine all the 100 teams you got in.
You're going without Salah and Haaland. You're going to need a big sofa.
Why? You think? Maybe. But how many teams had Salah? All of them?
No, not all of them.
Right.
No, not at all.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of about 90, 93, 94% of them did, but there was a few that didn't do it. I mean, Diaz, Trent, and Robertson was kind of the preferred three. I think the ones that didn't have him had those 3 players in. Yeah,
of course, you have to. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, this was done before Nunes' 4 goals as well. So I wonder if there's a lot of people in the chat kind of talking about Nunes and whether he can be a factor for us. If you think he's going to be the main man for Liverpool next season, he's 4 million less, isn't he? Then Salah might be an option.
Yeah, and do you not look at it and think? I mean, this is my thinking with Salah as well. I mean, I've got him at the moment, but I've done a lot of teams without him. Do you not think with Nunes coming in and Mane not there, there's quite a bit of change in the front line. Diaz settled really well, and we expect him to carry on that and probably grow as a player. But Nunes over Firmino or Nunes over Jota, that's a change, right? That's quite a significant change, perhaps. And if that is just a variable, which could mean that Salah perhaps isn't quite as effective in terms of output as we've seen in previous seasons, probably will be, but it's still an unknown you're injecting into that forward line, right? That we haven't had before. When Diaz out wide on the opposite flank, perhaps not so much of a disruption, but when you're changing that central player, and suddenly Liverpool have got an out-and-out goal scorer, which, let's face it, Firmino never was. Jota became an out-and-out goal scorer for them, but I would say Nunes is a step above Jota, right? And presumably they paid that money for that. So is there a risk that is an unknown that could mean that the gap between Salah and Son, which last season was 8 points? Perhaps the gap between Salah and Son might not be very big at all. Again, what do you think?
Well, again, though, we're not looking at this over the whole season. We're looking at this over the first 5. And I know Spurs have good fixtures, but Liverpool with Fulham, Palace, United, Bournemouth, Newcastle, I just want the main Liverpool guy for that run. It's such a good opening first 5 games. And, I mentioned a bit with Arsenal and, all these other players are changing in different positions, but Salah's role in the team isn't going to change. He's going to be the one who gets the ball, drives. He's a selfish player anyway. He's going to stay on pens. He's still going to be the main man, and he starts seasons so strongly.
He does,
He's so fit. I know he stays so fit. And while other players are maybe finding their feet, he's just going to be out there. So he's just there's no.
I get it.
I don't get me wrong though. I what you're saying, I get it. I think there isn't much between Son and Salah. I don't. If people want to do it, go for it. But Fulham away, game week 1. That's the best fixture of all. That's my captain for sure.
It probably is the best fixture of all because we expect Fulham to be the most permeable of the promoted defences. Bournemouth will put up a low block from the off. They won't show much interest in attacking. Forest will need time to gel their forward players. What they will do is rely on their defence, I think, early on. So I don't think Forest will give away as much. Fulham haven't changed their team much and will be, I hope, as enterprising as they were in the Championship and attack teams, right? So I think Fulham will give up more chances than the other 2 promoted teams early on. I think Forest will probably go that way as well eventually, but not at the start. So I do think it probably is the best game week 1 fixture. But Southampton at home is not a bad fixture either. And let's face it, Southampton, I don't know what to make of them, but they ended the season incredibly badly. And have they strengthened? Not particularly from what I've seen. And they've got changes in the defence. I don't know. We have yet to see how well those players will adjust and what we'll have game week 1. But as we've seen, the thing with a Ralph team is they can absolutely capitulate. So it could, they don't know. If they have a bad week, it's normally a 5-0. It's not a 1-0, is it, with Southampton? So
I don't like their team at all, to be honest, Southampton. I mean, it's years of just losing their best players constantly. And I think Ralph has done an amazing job with them. I know they've had the odd huge result against them, but generally speaking, they've done well to stay in the league. I think they're just going to really struggle this season. And to be playing Spurs away, who have had such a good transfer window. I mean, Spurs are going to be out to challenge this season. Kane is happy again. They've got Son, got his best pal next to him in Son. They've got strength all round. Oh, I do definitely fear for them, and I fear for me not having any of their players.
Well, this is it. I look at this template. I think there's no Spurs attack at all.
No.
And if I was looking at this and going, well, if I was the type of manager to go on ownership and go, where can I gain something in terms of ownership? It's got to be the Spurs attack, hasn't it? It's got to be that, because you look at that and you think, if that's reflective of how managers around me are going to act with their lineups, the Spurs attack is the one to get on, I think, in order to differentiate your team from the template. That's what I take from that anyway.
I'm surprised not to see more. I know a lot of people are thinking about the Kane to Haaland switch, but I'm surprised that more people aren't thinking about the Son to De Bruyne.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that discussed or in any kind of teams.
Yeah. Well, I did it in the teams I didn't have Salah. I had teams of Son and Kane in, double up for Southampton, and then you've got the choice of going, do I go Son to De Bruyne or Kane to Haaland, depending on which I think is the better bet for City. So that is quite strong. And the fact, if you have Son going with one over Salah, you're not going to worry about getting rid of him away at Chelsea. Whereas if you have Salah, he's locked in, isn't he? How often are you going to sell Salah? You're not. It's very hard to do upside chasing with Salah. It's much easier to do upside chasing. When I say upside chasing, for those who don't know, that is moving a heavy hitter out for another heavy hitter. Going off of Kane to Haaland or Son to De Bruyne just feels easier, and you feel like you're more likely to do it than going Salah to somebody to De Bruyne. It does, right?
Yep.
So I think a Son Kane double up for Gameweek 1, knowing that you then move to one of the City, is pretty good. But then you've got to go without Salah, I think, which is really tough.
So tough.
Let's look at your team so far. This is what you're going with right now. It is going to. How likely is this going to change? 99%.
Well, I mean, it changed about 5 different times last night.
Right.
When you just get into the kind of zone, the tinkering zone.
Oh well, I'm in the tinkering zone all the time.
I know. Yeah. Well, I've actually gone back.
It sounds awful.
It does, doesn't it? That sounds a bit weird. I did a draft for Scout a few weeks ago, and this actually looks kind of fairly similar to that one. So I've ended up kind of going back to that. I had taken Sterling out and kind of move things around. I will tell you the teams as it comes on screen. So it's Raya in goal, Trent, Cancelo, Chilwell, and Zinchenko. I really like Zinchenko. It was Dean before, but that move for Zinchenko is really interesting. I mean, if he plays in midfield, for example, I think that's going to be a real coup, and we're going to see a lot of investment in him. Salah, Sterling, Sancho, and Neto. So Sterling I like as a differential. Sancho, a lot of people going for Rashford. I still have my doubts about Rashford. He's had such a poor couple of seasons. I just worry that his trajectory is still down, whereas I think Sancho's is up, because he's not going to have a season, I don't think, like he did last year. I think he's just too good.
He's 7.5. He's a million more. That's the thing.
He is. I just think Ilanga's there on the left for Rashford. It will only take a couple of poor games.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, we'll talk about mine in a minute, but I definitely. The thing is with Sancho is surely he's a wait and see player rather than a Gameweek 1 player, isn't he?
Well, this is what you were saying earlier. He is a wait and see, but I don't need to have him forever. I'm going to keep him. The Ten Hag wave that I mentioned is interesting. I mean, pre-season they have
that's a Ten Hag wave.
they have been good pre-season, and they played Liverpool, for example. They played a second string Liverpool, but they're looking with Ronaldo not there. And it's like what we've talked about lots of times last season. They just look more vibrant in attack and more attacking, and the pressing's better. Fernandes is back pulling the strings, and the fixtures are decent for United. So he's someone that I can probably switch fairly easily as well at 7.5. I can move Sterling down to an 8 if I want to. They're just my kind of 2 players who I'm not seeing in too many teams who are a little bit different.
Yeah. I love the Sterling pick. It's a brave one. Again, for me, I've had teams of him in. I've had non-Salah teams with Son and Sterling, which I'd love to go with, but I don't know if I've got the balls in me to do it. Sterling, is he going to fly out the block straight away? That's my only thing. I don't trust Tuchel's attack very much. I mean, I trust it to go Mount. I don't know if I trust it to go 10 to Sterling. The thing is about Mount is he's so consistent. Sterling, I want to see how he fits in. I want to see how he plays. I mean, you presume it's Havertz who's going to drop into space and Sterling's going to get beyond him, right? That's what you imagine.
I like that.
I like that.
I like that.
If there's a glimpse of that, then I'm with you. I can go with it, but I just don't know if I'm going to have that have enough surety of that for game week 1. But yeah, he's in my thinking for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Sterling as well is, I mean, he's 10 million, then you've got all the 8s who are so good. I mean, Maddison is absolutely flying pre-season, and Rodgers has already said it's the best he's ever seen him play for Leicester and Brentford in game week 1. So, I want to make sure I've got at least one player 8 million or over to move to that. And I do wonder if Sterling is worth the kind of 2 million, because it's meant that I've got Kane up front, but then Undav. So the Brighton Undav.
Undav's not a factor at the start, is he? Surely they're going to start Welbeck on Mopé. I mean, I think Undav will come in eventually, but do you see him starting?
He's very much a kind of, if I'm not 100% sure he's going to start or close to 100%, then he won't be in the side. But I keep saying to people, he hasn't been brought in to be a bit part player and put pressure on Mopé or anything like that. He has been brought in to take Brighton to the next level. He's a league above the strikers we have in that side. He will be in the team. I have absolutely no doubt he'll be in the team sooner rather than later. Whether it is game week 1, I'm going to need some kind of assurances. Mopé got 2 goals in pre-season just a few days ago. Undav came off the bench, set one up and scored one as well. Welbeck will probably start. Have you seen a picture of Welbeck? He's absolutely ripped now.
What is it with footballers, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a good thing to be as muscular as that. It's really odd. Like Rashford's done it as well. I saw an image of Mason Mount, how he's grown, bulked up. I mean, I know strength is a big thing, but so is speed and agility. And it's like, it is odd how these players bulk. I mean, one of the things about Antonio is sometimes he looks so muscular. He gets so tired and lethargic. So, it's a balance, isn't it? But all the players this summer have got, is it an Instagram thing? Do you reckon Welbeck's thinking, I've only got a couple of years left. Maybe Instagram's the way to go. Let's bulk up.
He doesn't strike me as an
No,
Instagram
he doesn't,
player.
but I don't know. It's a bit odd, isn't it? At the stage of career he's at, to suddenly go, right, I'm going to hit the gym. It's fair play to him. Who am I to talk? Who are we to talk, in fact?
I know.
But the thing is with Undav, right, he's a 5-5 forward. Surely you can get more value out of going a 4-5 forward and a 5-5 defender, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, again, Dean is a consideration. I mean, I really like Dean in that 5 million bracket. And if you're asking me, kind of even over 5 or over the season, or whether who scores more points, Dean or Undav, I'm probably saying Dean. And there's nowhere really to move Undav to. I mean, the good thing about Undav is Neco Williams is there, who I think is a good option. He's a complete gift, for you in defence of 4 million. So if Undav doesn't play, but yeah, I think the fact that I'm pretty much going to have to go with Undav or not might make me kind of reconsider. So I mean, I only got 2 Liverpool, for example, and I do really like Diaz. I'm really kind of
2 Liverpool
keen on him.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs, right? But Undav to me is just that kind of fun pick. I'm backing him to have a really good season for Brighton. I'm backing us to have a good season this year. And sometimes it's just nice to own a player from your team, as I'm sure you're going to show me that you've got.
Well, you're going to be very surprised then, aren't you? Because I haven't got any of them.
What?
No.
You haven't got Jesse?
No, not at the moment. I've got another lineup in a minute I'll show you with him in. So at the moment, I've got Ederson, Cancelo, Trent, James, Robertson, Gabriel, Salah, Saka, Rashford, Neto, and then Kane up front. And then I've put the captaincy on Kane just to tease the fact that I might not go Salah captain in game 1. Yeah, absolute clickbait. On the bench, Olsen, just because he looked good pre-season, he won't get in front, but it's a 4 million keeper. Andreas Pereira, as we said, Archer, who I think will get minutes off the bench for Villa because he has looked very good pre-season. I really rate him. Had a very good season with Preston, and then Planju's a really good prospect for Palace as well. Who equally could get some minutes this season. But you're not looking at your 4-5 forwards and hoping to get in and think Pereira will be my sub if I need him, and he will start most games for Fulham. But yeah, that's what I'm going at the moment. I think I'm going to go for 5-4-1 at the start of the season. I don't think that will change. Personnel will change. Players at most risk here. Gabriel could go to Zinchenko. But the reason I've gone Gabriel is you mentioned Palace versus Leicester, first 2 games. Who are the weakest? Pieces. Weakest player teams at set pieces.
Very good.
Gabriel scored at Leicester last season, I believe. And he's also got Fulham early on, and he scored at Fulham on his debut from a set piece as well. So Gabriel, I think, is an interesting pick because he gets you that Arsenal defence, but he gets you a real threat in those first 2 games as well. And I've seen Palace pre-season. They played Millwall pre-season, 2 goals conceded from set pieces straight away. And the commentary was like, oh, here we go again with set pieces. So they don't look as though... Yeah. And if they start with Gahey and Anderson, that's the same centre-back pairing. right? So they're relying on what? Their goalkeeper to improve the set piece issue. So I do worry that they're going to start with a set piece problem. Leicester, you'd think, will be working on that pre-season, but they were so bad that they've probably got about 5 years of work to do. It's not going to fix over one summer, is it? They were just awful at set pieces, weren't they? So every team who plays against them, they're going to go play for corners and stick the big bows in and stick it in the mixer. So I like Gabriel for those first two. The players who are going to change, who are on the teetering on the brink, are Saka, Rashford and Neto. I don't think the rest is going to, and Gabriel, I don't think the rest is going to change. Edison, I could go 4-5 if I need that million. Salah and Son, I've looked at what I could do with the extra million. It's not enough, though, is it? They needed to make Son 11.5 or even 11, didn't they? And De Bruyne 11 or 11.5. If they'd have made those two 11 or 11.5, coming off Salah would have been easier. But a million gain to come down off Salah is not enough, is it? It's not enough.
It's not enough of a carrot to tease us. We talked about that straight after the prices came out, didn't we? I thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity, but yeah, I really like this team. I really want to slate it. I love slating your teams, but the only one, like I said, the only one I don't really like is Rashford because I just think he's initial. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. You only got him for a couple of weeks. He's 6'5".
This is the alternative.
So strong. The rest of it is so strong, though.
This is the alternative, right? And this is basically going, I'm going to go Martinelli over Saka, and I'm going to go Mount over Saka. I've got a table on this, actually, on Mount versus Saka, which is really interesting. So this is Edison, Cancelo, Trent, James, Robertson, Gabriel. Same back five. Salah, Martinelli, Mount, Lingard and Kane up front. Same price. I've just changed the three midfielders. That is, I've got doubts over Neto, because Neto plays for Wolves. And Wolves, although he's a great player, I don't know what we're going to get from Wolves. If we saw last season, blimey, they were awful and just long spells, weren't they? And they haven't changed too much. Yeah, in attack. This is it. You know, Neto's a good attacking player in a bad attacking team, I think. I don't know, but I think that's the case. Therefore, you know, I look at this midfield three, or with Salah, Martinelli, Mount and Lingard. Lingard, all right, there's some bias there, but Lingard's, if you to believe the wages, he's on 25 grand a goal, isn't he? He's got like I think he's on 80 grand basic a week, plus it can go up to 121 grand a week on with bonuses. You've got to think the bonuses are win and goal bonuses, right? So if he's on 25 grand per goal, he's going to have a few shots in a game, and he might even push Brennan off penalties. And Lingard is, you know, you don't have he defies XG, doesn't he? He scores brilliant goals. He's like a Son in that he doesn't score tap-ins. He scores excellent goals or are low on XG. And I think he's going to be so pivotal to Forest. X-Mins for Lingard is going to be high. He's going to play every game. He's going to play most games to 85, 90, I would have thought. It's just Forest start. I don't necessarily want to start with him, so I probably won't go with this. What do you think on the Mount versus Saka thing?
I prefer Mount.
Yeah, you see, I've got this table. I'm going to bring this up. It's really interesting because I thought there'd be quite a gap between Mount and Saka, and I thought it would favour Saka. But the table I'm bringing up now, if you look at last season, both players improved massively from their previous two seasons in 21-22. XGI non-penalty for Saka per 90 is 0.51. For Mount, it's 0.57. Shot in the box for Mount, 1.83. compared to Saka on 2.17. So he's better than him there. But I was surprised how close Mount was to all areas to Saka, and he's ahead of him for XGI non-penalty. And if anything, you know, I look at the X-Mins and think maybe Mount will play more games this season as well. He got 11 goals, 11 assists. Saka got 11 goals, 9 assists. And Mount got that from 27 starts compared to 36 starts for Saka. So his output was really strong, despite starting fewer games. I mean, I think Mount will start more this season, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, he had a few injuries, didn't he, last season, which is why he kind of fell away a bit. Yeah, I mean, I did a video for Scout, best 8 million midfield options, you know, looking at kind of all of them. And I wasn't really expecting Mount to feature so highly in terms of XGI per 90. I think he's the second. I mean, Mahrez is top with 0.86, but there's kind of some question marks around him. You got Foden 0.64. Again, question marks around him. And then, you know, looking at Kulusevski, Maddison, Diaz, Saka and Mount, it's Mount next, 0.59. So nearly at that 0.6 kind of magic number.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think next season he kicks on.
And so
even
what
more.
it means as well is like you could gamble on going Martinelli over Saka, go Mount as your 8 million. So that's an option, isn't it? So I am looking at that. It's whether or not, how confident am I in Rashford in that first lineup? You know, Rashford at 6'5" could be amazing, but there's question marks over him and there's question marks over Neto. I think you know what you get with Mount. I think you know what you get with Lingard. I'm pretty certain Lingard's going to get us 10 goals. I think he's going to get 10 goals.
Yeah.
The number 10 for Forest, I watched Forest last season a lot, both in the flesh and on TV. And the number 10, we had Zinkernagel playing the 10, and our two forwards split wide so often. They play the channels and they allow the 10 to come into central areas.
He's going to love
all
that.
the time, right?
Yeah,
Zinkernagel, no end product, absolutely no end product, as you used to say. Good player, a lot of skill, not the best finisher in the world. Well, not at all. Lingard, yeah, he's got an end product and a half, right? So if he's playing the 10 in the Forest system, he's going to be great, I think. It will take us some games, though, to get there. I think that's why I'm worried about starting with him. It will take us till game week 5 or 6 to get into a rhythm and gel the players. Our fixtures are a lot better then. That's when you bring him in. But I am tempted to start with him. I am tempted.
He's a top 6 sort of bit part player or a top 10 starter, Lingard. I think it's a big statement from you to get him. I know he's obviously got all the dancing and all that kind of stuff, but on the pitch, he does deliver. He's a very, very talented man, and I think he was badly treated at United, particularly last year.
I can't believe he only started 2 games for them last season.
It's ridiculous when you consider how bad they were and the energy they needed from that kind of position. Really poor from them. So. It's nice that, you know, I mean, West Ham obviously were an option, and he probably had other options elsewhere. But, you know, I know the money's a big factor, but I think he just wants to play, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see. More on Lingard over the summer, no doubt. I'm going to get a couple of plugs in now. You're going to do one. I'm going to do the other. Fest pre-season, 5th of August. It's going to be amazing. It always is, the pre-season one, because we have the deadline, and that deadline will be that night because it's Arsenal Palace. And we'll have the countdown to the deadline, and we'll all be changing our teams around other FPL managers. Yeah, your camera's knocking in and out. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, we'll be there changing our teams to the very last minute. There'll be a countdown to the deadline, and then obviously Palace Arsenal that night as well. It's going to be a great night. Come and join me and other FPL managers in Waterloo. Fantasy Football Fest. Look it up online and you'll find that there's tickets still available for 20 quid. And then you're going to talk about the Scout Community Tournament run by Greyhead, our friend Greyhead, who runs the Great and the Good League, which I've managed to preserve my place in. We won't go into that, though. Tell us more about the tournament, Az.
A series of bribes have kept you in that. Greyhead's community tournament is picking up a lot of traction this season. Strikers, keepers, losers, weepers. It ran last season. Managers with their teams, and the teams are made up of like FPL managers. 900 people have signed up already. 48 teams. The closing date, if you want to be involved in this community tournament, is the 25th of July. So if you don't know what it is, I did a video for Scout talking to Greyhead and Boris, who's the other guy sort of running it. Have a check out on that. But basically, it's a massive tournament where you get involved in a team, and your points are all kind of tallied together, and you go against someone else. And they run them every year, and they're absolutely brilliant. So
it's great fun, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And like Fest, it's another way of contacting other FPL managers and making friends online with them that perhaps you wouldn't have met on Twitter, or if you're not on Twitter, not come across at all. It really does build that community feel that's growing all the time in FPL, which is great.
Have you seen that Tim Sherwood's done a video for one of the teams?
Yeah, that's one of those. You know, you can pay 25 quid to get. I knew when I saw you could do that, I was thinking someone's going to do that for something, aren't they? They're going to get their team sheet read out by them every week or something like that. But that's hilarious, isn't it? It was great.
So good. We've got a few people in the chat as well. Team Maradona Kebab. To an FPL and FPL Dan up the kebabs. The other thing as well is the MVP draft, in which last season I was number 1 pick.
You were? What's going on there?
Go on about it. That will be on the 3rd of August.
Right.
A few new names in that. Andy North, for example, really lowering the bar.
Hold on, is Andy North an MVP this time around? Okay.
What have we created with him? And we'll be sharing the results of that on the BlackBox that follows it. So it'd be interesting to know if you're picked before me.
It's great, isn't it?
Would have thought so.
Well, I would have thought so before. I don't know, though, on last season. I'll tell you what I'm loving about this show already. The ranks have gone. Got rid of those ranks, starting afresh.
You even forgot to put the bloody league code in.
I know, you got to give me the league code. Do you have it at hand now so people listening can join the league?
I pinned it in the chat.
Number 1 league last season. Number 1 league. Are we going to do that again? Beat Slippers again? Let's do that.
The league code, for anyone wondering, is... hang on.
Oh, this is it. This is the content.
Hang on. The league code is... Quick, stall, Mark. Stall.
Oh, I don't know what to say.
I've got it. It's 3v7
yeah.
DQ9.
3v7 DQ9. There you go. Join our league. It was only the best league around last season. So join that. Isn't it great? I'm so excited. You know what? I was pretty down on the prices when they came out, but I don't think it's too bad now at all. I've actually been enjoying building teams, and I think there's going to be a bit of variety now. I really do. So I'm really looking forward to it, and stuff like the fest and the community tournament. It's reminding me how great it is to be part of the FPL community and how much fun it's going to be again. So I'm really up for it. There you go.
Yeah, my biggest thing to people is just, I know there's a strong template. The template is obviously good, but that doesn't mean other players can't do as well. And if you've got a feeling about players, just be brave and just go for it. You don't need to conform. It's always my message at this stage. If you start with the template, you'll probably do well, but there are players in that template who won't do well. And if you can pick those and get someone else, then you'll do well. So don't be a sheep.
Brilliant. There you go. Over 2 hours again. Well, I guess we'll be back next week. We've got to do pre-season roundup. We'll probably do that the week before the season starts. We're going to look at some lessons learned as well. We'll probably do that next week. Should we do that next week and make it a shorter show? Yeah, let's look back at that. Let's do some black box thinking. But for now, that's all from us this week. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks for the 1,000 who are joining us in chat. Of course, you've got to say one thing before we go, of course, which is the usual as. Do it.
Please make sure, if you're watching this video, to smash that like button.
Not just hit it.
Just break your keyboard with how much you've smashed it. No, we do. We got 1,000 watching, 230 likes. Come on, people. Be great to boost that number up. Also, subscribe to the channel. I mean, how many subscribers have we got these days? 23, 24,000, something like that?
24 point something or other. Yeah.
I want to get my suit out. Let's try and hit 30,000.
Yeah. Oh, talking of Clobber on the stream, I did say that if Lingard signed, you could choose a piece of Lingard merch from the J-Ling store and I would wear it on stream. So
I picked it. You're getting that pink hoodie. It's lovely.
Oh, no. Which one? The all pink one?
Yeah. Was it all pink or was it white with a bit of pink on it?
Oh, God.
I'd like you to wear the hat as well, but that's optional.
And I did say I'd wear it at Fest, but I'm retracting that completely. Although it might sell a few more tickets if I say I'm going to turn up in that, mightn't it?
I know what's going to happen. We're going to put the hoodie on and wear it. I'm going to like it. And then you're going to really like it. Yeah. It's definitely what's going to happen.
Well, we'll see. I'm not so sure about that. It's a good night for me.
Good night, everyone.